Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the FY27 budget workshop presentation. And so we'll go ahead and get started. Purpose of today's workshop is to present a working draft of the proposed budget, to share the highlights, key changes, and departmental priorities, and provide a platform for council and staff discussion, gather feedback to inform final budget decisions. Context of this meeting, the budget reflects strategic planning and council retreat and staff's input from February till present, and estimates are preliminary, meant to guide direction, or not final. And I'll just add, in addition to the retreat department input, I've received council members' individual concerns and ideas expressed over the last several weeks individually. So I've kind of taken that and tried to incorporate that in our work as well. So I just want to make that point. So here we'll have the FY26 highlights. A lot of good work's been done through the last 10 minutes of the current fiscal year when we look at coastal resiliency, continuing to advance our Frying Pan Shoals bar site permitting efforts. Continuation of the Marina Channel Entrance Maintenance Program with the shallow draft navigation grant that we get through DEQ. That's a 75% cost share. DEQ it has a 75%. We pick up the 25%. That's been working out nicely. We've been doing that now probably for 4, 5, 6 years. I don't know, time eludes me. It could be even longer, but it saved the village quite a bit of money.
Chris, do you get to say when you dredge, or do you have to go to the approval?
Yes, we do. And we coordinate with observations from the transportation ferry captains. Typically, they'll be giving us.
You don't have to get approval. You can say we need it. Okay.
Yeah. Looking at this disaster response and recovery, we implemented post PTCA flood mitigation measures, including grinder pumps and snorkel extensions, and initiated the Lassie 2 stormwater master plan effort with DEQ with a $350,000 grant. And on the water and wastewater investments, we completed the engineering, design, and permitting submittal for the expansion project. That was funded by a $951,000 DEQ grant. And we advanced the system-wide asset inventory assessment for the water and sewer with a $500,000 grant, DEQ grant. And just to acknowledge, in sum total with those, that's $1 billion in grant funds. We're not requiring village monies to be spent to do this work. Public safety enhancements, we received delivery of the new ladder truck pumper engine and 2 ambulances. That was through the FEMA funding, $1.6 million, and financing strategies that we'll show a little later. Environmental and parks projects, or support with parks contribution with increased public works staff attention and establishing a baseline for continued maintenance and upkeep. And the deer herd management project that we successfully completed, meeting the recommended take of 100 deer under budget. Infrastructure improvements, we established that capital reserve fund for the long-term funding of roads and the timber bridge, and initiated the off-island office space lease to improve space needs. And just to acknowledge with that another savings long-term could be seen with not having to construct a village hall, a new village hall. About 3-4 years ago or so, we had full construction design and put it out to bid, and it was just under $4 million.
It was right around COVID.
Mm-hmm. So this gives us the opportunity to continue to work and provide space in our current village hall with this. Community and quality of life, we launched the Village Podcast Before the Horn Blows to enhance visitor and resident communications, advanced IC vehicle and trailer ordinance updates. On the policy and planning initiatives, we advanced long-range planning and capital improvement plan development.
I had a quick question for you.
Yeah.
And the disaster relief, disaster response, the flood mitigation, the grinder pump, snorkel extensions. Are we all done with that?
JP,
The snorkel and floodplain modifications to all the tanks have been completed. The concrete tank replacement is underway.
Okay.
I think we have 6 done to date
Okay.
out of 40.
That'll be likely a highlight for next year. All right, moving into the general fund budget with general overview, with the general fund supporting governmental services of the village, including public safety, public works, community services, and general administration serves as the primary operating fund for delivering essential services to residents, property owners, and visitors. For FY 27, the fund reflects strategic priorities and maintains service quality, workforce sustainability, and infrastructure needs. Major components include with public safety, 4.6 million, budget increase to 229,000 to support fire, police, and emergency services. Public works, 2.9 million with the increase of 283,000 for street maintenance, facility upkeep, and island beautification efforts. Our general government support services, 3.69 million with an overall budget decrease of 401,000 for admin, council, legal, IT, finance, and HR. And with our debt service, about 3.8 million obligated for beach renourishment, geo bonds, public safety apparatus loans, public safety building loan, and contractor services building loan. This is actually a $802,000 decrease due to the retirement of 2 loans in FY 27. Overall, property tax rate reduction of 0.0257 is proposed in the budget. Some fees in various areas include vehicle permits and contractor services rentals are proposed to increase to help fund improvements to the village's roads and contractor services yards. These adjustments support continued excellence in service delivery, safety, and long-term sustainability of the village operations.
Chris, what is an exact 2.57 cents? What does that total to?
About 196,000 per penny.
So it's about $500,000 reduction.
Yep. 504.
Say it again.
504.
Right. General fund expenditures highlights, preserves core services across all departments, ensuring.
Question. Yeah. So that's to say, if we approve this budget, then tax bills go out with that reduction.
Yes.
And my rough numbers in my head means that instead of spending 26 million as a village, we spend 25.5. Or I guess there's more complicated math because you have more houses on the island.
Yeah, and other revenue sources too.
Okay.
For one, taxes, right? So, like Chris said, we increased the vehicle permit fees and all that.
Yeah. So Zach, you're so polite. You're quiet and listen up, Herman. You'll hear it later. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into once we get to the expenditures, we'll get into the revenue side. Jesse, and I should have said you and Slaughter specifically, this being your first workshop. I mean, feel free to ask questions as we go through it. And if you ask a question, I might say, we'll get to that.
Don't be too polite. Just say, we'll get to it.
Say, wait.
Actually, it's Slaughter. He's a fan.
All right. Yeah, once I get to the highlights and stuff, we'll start really getting into the numbers with charts and tables and pie charts. But I just want to let you know, we're looking to invest over $1 million in capital outlay. This supports road improvements, road paving, 330,000 and department specific capital upgrades. Total of 779,000, including 350,000 in transfer to the capital reserve fund that we set up this past year. Plans for decreased debt service commitments, just to acknowledge that we paid off the 2018 debt for the geo bond beach renourishment, but the 2024 will come slide in and replace that. But with other public safety related installment financings for the apparatus, the debt service is actually expected to decrease by about 802,000. This budget proposes 1.5 FTEs. One of those in Public Works. We want to establish a village custodian position. This will replace a contracted cleaning services that we've had for the last 25 years or so. They're just retiring. And so we had discussed this over the last couple of years, acknowledging that. So the time is right. So and so the funds that paid that contract will be allocated to cover this position. Although there will be, salary plus benefits, it's going to be a little more.
Yep.
But we'll be able to do more with that person, I think. Finance, we want to establish a part-time accounting tech up to 20 hours a week. When we discussed about accommodations tax and revenues that we may be leaving it out there on the table, if it's 200,000, 300, whatever that is, we want to try this sort of as a pilot project to see what we can bring in with that. Let's see here. And then other considerations for our employees and compensation, looking at a 3% cost of living adjustment for all employees, and then a merit increase of up to 4% for high performers. And then a reduction.
So the finance tech, you're saying, as I understand it, that person would be looking for opportunities to increase the accommodations tax revenue from maybe people that haven't been filing, things like that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Got it.
Yeah. As well as outreach, right? Like to property management companies and property owners and just.
Sure. A carrot and a stick. Yeah. Okay.
And then want to recognize the reduction in legal expenditures with approximately 546,000 decrease. And then continued environmental stewardship partnership with the Conservancy on many of the services with the herd management, forest health, aquifer monitoring, water quality, and wildlife population monitoring is included. All right. Looking overall at the general fund expenditures, this chart reflects when we look at personnel, operating, capital outlay, legal, contingency, and debt service from current FY26 to the proposed FY27, decreased $1 million. This reflects decreases in all areas with exception of personnel. We'll have an increase in personnel. We'll get into those numbers a little later. But the obvious, with legal, that reduction of 546,000. So we're budgeting 201,000 there. Then we still have the contingency, of course, but it's slightly reduced. And then our debt service is reduced by 802,000 because of those two loans coming offline.
Chris, just looking at legal and again, if you're going to get to, that's fine. How did these numbers, how did the 201,000 come about?
Yeah. So that number is a reflection of, we took an average over the 12 months and from that, and in consultation with Charles, felt like that was a good budget number.
Okay. Just the one thing I'm thinking about is the harbor deepening and the dredging, and we have to stay on top of that.
We do. I think what I suggested with Charles, when he agreed that we've done most of the heavy lifting on that in terms of all the work that Bill Harry did and our work with other subject matter experts on the container volume analysis.
Okay.
But obviously we will monitor that monthly, and we start getting to a point where we're getting close, then we're going to have the, we'll discuss it and figure out.
Because
in addition, if there, my takeaway, at least from our previous budget amendment, to add additional appropriations to cover expenses was like, if there's something that's going on or something above the routine day-to-day, like the mayor and I, over the last week or 2 weeks, we've been dealing with all these inquiries about the lot clearing and from a land use standpoint, and sort of getting it, trying to manage that and stay ahead of that, making sure we're not putting the village is not in a compromising situation. So we've been having phone calls and conferences with Will. That's time.
Yes, I know.
So
Will is our attorney who is.
Yeah.
So, I sent you a note on this. He made a proposal during the meeting about putting in a project. You recall this?
the UDO,
Well, what he said, just summarizing I don't want to drag us through it here, but he spoke of that costing possibly $100,000.
That was the UDO though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a separate item, totally. I mean, that's something we'll discuss it, but we can make that decision at any time. And this is something we looked at in the previous councils. We ought to be doing a UDO, unified.
Yeah. What I plan to do, Jesse, I'd like to share with you the specific scope of the project for the Unified Development Ordinance that we got the RFP on, so y'all can see exactly what that entails. And then we can have some follow-up discussion maybe at the May meeting if, for example, we wanted to pull the trigger on that. Well, in this current fiscal year, I think we've got some monies that we could allocate to it versus putting it in the FY27 budget and having to add a little bit more to fund that.
Okay, so before we approve the budget, we'll make a decision on this.
No, hold on. Before we approve, yes, we would make a decision.
Okay, thank you.
To approve this budget in June.
Okay, yeah.
So the
That should be coming out of 26.
right,
Fully out of 26?
yeah, we could.
Okay,
It's important enough, right?
I agree.
gotcha.
Thank you. All right.
And this is one of these things, is it important enough? It's important enough today versus we got to do it. Maybe it's 5 years down the road, but boy, if we have them do it, there's a great argument for saying, let's get it done because it's got to be done.
Yeah, things have really heated up.
Yeah, it sounds to me like there's a great argument for getting it done.
Yeah.
Getting it done, but I don't want to be naive. So, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
We've been kicking that can down the road for some years now, right?
Will that be done 100% by June 30th?
Oh, no.
Okay, well, let's discuss it. It's
Okay.
not for right this minute.
Unless you could write the check and prepay.
Yeah.
That's probably not okay.
Was that project fun?
Um,
Anyway, we can.
We'll talk.
Okay, all right. Okay, so moving on, this slide and pie chart reflects the fund expenditures by function from personnel operating on down to contingency and the percent of the total budget. As you can see, majority of it takes up with personnel, 43% through operating and debt service at 20%.
Chris, I'm sure you factored in the 3% COLA, but what percentage did you throw in across the board for merit increases?
Merit, 3%, sorry, 4%.
Okay, so if we don't give somebody 4%, we give them 2%.
Right.
We're saving money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Working with Judy and our annual evaluation metrics and form, department heads were looking for a better way to acknowledge the high performers and then the low and in between and giving them something to award for that. But to your point, the budget includes straight across 4%.
Okay.
This pie chart again just acknowledges the personnel expenditures at 8.1 million, 43%. Diving deeper into personnel, this table and pie chart shows the different expenditures for personnel within each department. The big one, of course, is public safety with the most personnel at 28 employees. But in sum total, from this current fiscal year at 7.3 million and going up to 8.1 million budgeted. It's about 11.8% increase.
In public safety, when we have a storm, snowstorm, and they have to stay over, they get overtime?
No, public safety is unique in that they're always sort of essential personnel. So they're here regardless, working their 24-hour shift.
Gotcha.
Now, if there is a PSO that, let me go a little deeper there. If there's a PSO that in that particular pay period could get overtime if they've been working, you know, and picking up extra shifts to fill the need, they could get overtime that way, but not necessarily just because they're working during a emergency.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about like we had the snowstorm, the guys had to stay several days.
Yeah, we just pay them if they get overtime. That's different than the emergency compensation plan that we approve for other staff that are typically or only essential needed in response to a state of emergency.
Like public safety clearing trees.
Public works, clearing trees.
Public works, I'm sorry. That's what I meant to say.
Hey, Zach, as a follow-up, could you just send for this chart? So we don't need to drag everybody through it here, but just the number of employees in each category.
Sure.
Yeah, the other question on that chart is we're showing an 11.8% increase in personnel. And I realize that some of that is made up by the new positions, but it would be good to understand the variance and the breakout between new positions and increases for current positions.
Yeah, we're going to get to that, Slaughter.
Okay, all right, sorry.
All right. So
I had a
next
question for
Let me, you want me to get there? Do you want me to send that to you or you want just a quick answer to jot it down there?
Okay, go for it.
Sure. So public safety up about 28. Shoreline 1.5. Admin 3. Finance 5. IT 3.
Wait, finance 5, sorry. IT 3.
HR 2. Development services 1. IPC 4. Contractor services 1. And public work 16.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I think we'll get to their Slaughter with this next slide when you're looking at the variance on that 866,000. A big majority of that is with full-time salaries at 433,000. And when you look to the chart on the right, this breaks it down even further in terms of longevity, COLA, really COLA and merit takes the meat of that increase. But then here's that new full-time position for the custodian there. So that's the variance in full-time salaries. The other one, talk about insurance. While specifically to our health insurance with Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's a very minimal increase of not more than 3%. The other increases in there are primarily with benefits. Other benefits. Help me out, Zach. I know
The next slide.
all right.
But what is longevity?
So longevity is the annual payments to the employees at the end of the year for longevity service and sort of a seasonal bonus.
I still don't, I don't know what longevity service is.
That's that's sort of what we call it instead of a Christmas bonus. It's
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, I'm if I take out probationary increases, I got that. And new full-time positions, that comes up to roughly a little more than 1.3% or 1.3%. So that would suggest that the increase in pay is actually 7.4%. Am I doing the math right, Zach?
Between the COLA, merit, and longevity combined.
Yeah, everything.
Granted that the employee, like every employee in the village got a 4%, right? That was,
Well, it's just the budget base. So look, the reason I just noted that is because I was thinking you had you just said earlier 7% budget, but I'm reading more than 7% here.
with the longevity too, yeah. And not all, because this takes into account that there are vacant positions that won't get merit increases, but they do get a 5% probationary increase, right, in there too. And so that offsets each other also, right, like with.
Okay. Going a little further for reasons for the increase to other wages and benefits, when we look at LEO separation allowances for law enforcement officers to retire, that we pay them until they, help me out, Zach, was that Judy? 62. So until they reach 62, we're paying a subsidy. Part-time salaries, 38,000 for public safety. Those are we've got a list of public safety officers that we like to maintain 6 per shift. Sometimes that goes to 5. If we go to 5, we'll pull in a part-timer that we pay $25 an hour this year. We increased that to 30. What about you? $30? 25. 25. Okay. So $25 an hour without benefits, of course.
Was it last summer or the summer before we brought in some part-time people to help with the
That was last.
juvenile activity?
Yeah, that was this past summer, which we saw an increase in the overtime, which is the next one. Overtime. So we beefed up our overtime in public safety to help cover those costs for ramping up our law enforcement presence. For right now, that's working in lieu of adding
The cameras and
cameras or adding a 7th PSO per shift, which, at some point we're going to need to look at doing that. This year's not the time. I think I mentioned before, I've kind of tracked that with the percent of development of the island. So we're at 65%. Maybe a benchmark is when we hit 70%, we had the 7. But no, that's going to be a pretty significant cost increase to the budget for additional PSOs. Talking with benefits, maybe around 600,000.
so are there 3 shifts a day?
There's 4 shifts with 6 personnel per shift.
Okay, so 4 times 7. Or, yeah.
We've got 24 now. We were at 5 and we added the 6 probably about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. Time eludes me.
I remember when we did it, but
Yeah.
so I'm gonna say about 5 years ago.
All right.
It just, did everybody participate in the 401k?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Well, for the village,
yeah, okay,
they don't have to contribute,
got it.
but we do.
And those who don't contribute, we take some time to explain to them the benefits of,
We do that right during onboarding.
okay, great.
Because we don't participate in social security.
Yeah, no, just younger people tend to not recognize it. So it's useful to,
A lot of them do the match now.
great, thank you.
Yeah.
Again, the reference to the slight increase with health insurance at 3%. But the other part of the increase is with employees potentially adding dependent coverages. And then retirement for law enforcement and our other staff with increase And then the 401k based on salaries increase. Moving on to operating and legal, expenses budgeted for FY 27, with operating at 4.9 million and legal at 201,000. Majority of the operating is around personnel. I'm sorry, operating is, excuse me, disregard where I was going with that. All right. Here are the expenditures for operating and legal through each department, showing the variance between the current FY 26 and FY 27. Overall, we're looking at a reduction of 675,000. That's predominantly due to the reduction in legal fees at 546,000. And then in Shoreline at 314,000. We had budgeted last year and for some studying with the Frying Pan Shoal Borrow site effort. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, does that include the increase in legal that we put in?
The 314.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we've had increase in the legal fees that we put in recently.
Do those legal fees include the lobbying
No, lobbying is separate.
separate? And what about other professionals like the engineers?
Yeah, so within our administrative budget, we have a professional services that incorporates all those
Okay,
expenditures. I don't think we put that level of detail in here specifically, but
that's fine. I just didn't know where it was slotted.
Is there any substantial, I don't anticipate there is a substantial increase. We're going with changing auditors. We're changing our
We're
auditor.
going out for our RFP for audit services.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's out there now and it's supposed to come back the first week of May. For
Right.
you all to decide at May's council meeting how to proceed with that.
Okay.
But to answer your question, won't know that till they come back.
Okay. Okay.
see here, anything on so. Yeah, the one relative to the contractor services department increase of 132,000 is sales of or purchase of fuel, gas, and diesel, which is offset on the revenue side. So. All right. This next slide table represents operating without the legal expenses included, just to acknowledge, the difference between FY 26 current and proposed FY 27, with a decrease of approximately $129,000 or 2.6% decrease in operating. And again, a big part of that is that Shoreline area. Next slide, generating fund operating. Some of the reasons for the differences, specifically in public safety, we have a reduction in one-time painting costs. We painted the building in FY 26 interior. Again, Shoreline reduction, legal fees and monitoring. Administration increase associated with property and liability insurance increases due to new vehicles and flood coverages. In IT and HR, reallocation of software costs from IT, with some increase of software costs in IT. Contractor services, an increase due to estimated fuel and gasoline costs, as well as gravel for the parking lot. And then public works, increase in the GFL contract prices and solid and hazardous waste fees. Moving on to the debt service, this slide chart and table reflects our total debt service for the fiscal year, about 3.8 million or 20% of the general fund budget. The next slide, this table reflects the various loans, their original loan balance remaining as of the start of FY 27, the funding needed in FY 27 to meet the debt obligation, and the primary funding sources of where those revenues come or appropriations come to pay that debt. And then the final column is the payment date on those. And acknowledge again with the 2018 bond coming offline and being replaced with the 2024 bond payment of 2.75 million. And then the public safety building coming offline in December, and the public safety vehicles 1 coming offline in November.
So Chris, I'm not familiar. What is the GO bond?
The general obligation bond, which is the funding mechanism to be able to get the funds to pay for the installment financing for the beach nourishment project. So we had to take out a loan.
Yeah, it came up as a bond, a referendum issue in the election,
Yeah.
and the voters approved.
Because of the amount exceeding a threshold, the LGC requires us to hold a referendum.
Yep.
So this next slide, table and pie chart, just acknowledges with the lease, with the principal.
Okay, I'm sorry, Chris, I had one more. I was just making a note. The construction services loan, what was that one?
The contractor services loan was a loan we took out to construct the storage units that we put in some years ago.
Thank you. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll have another slide on that and the public safety apparatus as a reminder of how we set that up for you all.
Thank you.
This next slide just acknowledges with these loans, the principal and interest amounts, and the difference in payments between the current FY 26 and the FY 27 budget. And again, a reduction of $802,000. And that our GO bond debt service takes up the majority of that at 71%, would follow with public safety debt at 24.5% of our total debt service. Here's a slide referencing, how we set up the four public safety vehicles we purchased. So with the vehicles and equipment debt service, 2.9 million and 361,000, we those donations at 450,000 and interest earnings at 140,000, and then the FEMA funds at 1.76 million left us with a total net cost of village of 977,000. So we set up the 10-year term to pay back that total with an approximate annual loan payment of 122,000.
Take away, we got 4 public safety vehicles for a third of the total.
Is there anything in the budget for possibly replacing any further public safety vehicles?
Right, not specifically in the budget, but to acknowledge we are working through the state Representative Miller's office for a potential grant to fund a pumper mini truck. I can have Buddy speak to a little more in detail on the rationale.
I think we talked about that Friday.
We did.
Yes.
We did.
I just didn't know where we're going to
Yeah, we put in a funding request for 400,000, so we'll see how that plays out. Looking at our general fund expenditures and capital outlay at a total of 1.1 million, that's about 5.9% of the total budget, general fund budget. Capital outlay is broken down into categories of, less than 5,000 or assets greater than 5,000. This just provides a description of those. what we budgeted in the current fiscal year. And what we propose in FY 27 with a reduction of 224,000. And we'll get a more detail on the specific items here next. Yeah.
And just to interject here real quick, so I may be coming back to you all in a couple months to talk about our capitalization threshold schedule. Right now, the way it's set up is like every item in the village over $5,000 has to be capitalized. But through I guess recent GASB implementations and just classes I've attended, it probably shouldn't be a flat line for everything, because vehicles cost $30,000, right? So that should be your threshold there. Do you really need to capitalize every golf cart you buy if it's a used golf cart that costs $6,000, right? So maybe bring that to you all for discussion in a few months just to look at.
So Zach, the way I'm going to answer is whatever the auditors say we have to do is what I go with.
So this table reflects the various capital outlay items by department. I think some of the highlights, one with transportation and road paving at 300,000 here for the roads as part of our 5-year road paving program.
So Chris, that's when we heard a fair, we've gotten some feedback on, not just what we got last meeting, but elsewhere. You're comfortable with the schedule that we have here, so you've been doing this a while.
Yes, I mean, between Zach, JP, and I, we have had some discussion. Given we set up that restricted fund for road paving, if we could do more, possibly.
I have a question about that. So is it being restricted? How much we do is being restricted by money, or how much of a window we have for paving? Or is it a juggling between the two?
It's a little bit of a juggling act, but right now I would say we may have more money available to do more.
And we have a contract for what we're about to do in May?
Yes.
And do we have any provision for adding to that contract?
A good question. I think at this point it's probably more of an issue on the contractor side and fulfilling that even if we asked.
Okay. I mean, this is one that, looking after the contract is executed,
Right.
so geez, we should have done more.
Yeah, so that I think I'm with Peter on this one. Look, I trust me, I want to be on the other side of spending more money, but I also don't want this to be an area where I would suggest that, you'd be very comfortable that we're doing enough that there's always going to be complaints. I get that. So I mean to say that you never hear anything ever, but I mean, let's get to where you feel very comfortable with. And if this isn't enough, then let's have a discussion before we approve the budget.
So remind me, Zach, with the restricted fund, we can always appropriate more into the capital line for this and it not affect our tax rate.
So just to clarify what you just said, you can take money from that transfer to capital reserve line item and move it up into the paving. But if you increase that transfer to capital reserve fund line item and don't change anything else in the budget, no. Like if you leave all that the same, but you want to transfer more out, you're going to have to find other revenue sources. Because that 350,000, we'll get to this part, the details of this later in the presentation, but that 350,000 is made up of you get a set number of daily and annual vehicle permits coming in, and then you subtract out all the associated expenses with those to include road paving, right-of-way maintenance. There's other things in there too. And the remainder of that is that 350,000. So that's how we have that there to transfer out payable. We only have 300,000 scheduled for payment. So if you take you can adjust those line items, but if you want to increase, the transfer itself and leave everything else the same, that will need a revenue adjustment somehow.
Okay.
So,
All right.
But
Let's,
the 300,000 that we have budgeted, that's coming, that is an expense in this year's budget. And then we're also expensing the transfer to the capital reserve fund, but we're not taking anything out of the capital reserve fund for this budget. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay. So if you decided you really wanted to spend more money on roads, one source could be taking money out of the capital reserve fund, not advocating that, but just that would be one way to do it, right?
Yeah, and just for clarification on that,
It would be the same as taking out of the 350 really, but the net effect is the same. Okay.
And that capital reserve fund, just for awareness here, it's only a year old and it's only got like
Right,
200,000. So it hasn't built up a balance hardly at all. So
Got it.
I'm not suggesting we raid that money at all.
Yeah, it'd be like rating our rainy day fund the second year we did it.
I do think that some of this, and I know we have to react to comments that we hear, but I want to say that my feeling on this, some of this is that we need to probably do a good job of setting people's expectations of what they should expect long term, both from the standpoint of which roads and when they would be paved and serviced, but also the fact that, and I've been coming to Bald Head since 1987. I don't believe there's ever been a time where I drove on a perfectly smooth, flat road from one place to another on the island. And so, pretty much there's never been a time where I could take a glass of water that was half full and drive around the island and end up with the same amount of water in that glass if it were sitting in my cart. So I don't think that people's expectations necessarily are set at the right level right now.
okay. All right, we'll staff will get back and look at that, maybe for a little refinement there possible. So a few other big ticket items. We need a new backhoe here and at 90,000, and with the recent event with the snow and looking at acquiring a snow plow that could be affixed to that could possibly be used to do a few other things, but the compact wheel loader with cab and bucket here at 100,000 for public works. So if anybody has any questions on any of these items specifically, staff will be available to respond.
Chris, I do I know you mentioned for snowplow, what else would we be thinking to use that for? Do we have a specific use identified, or you're just saying good to have it on hand?
I'm gonna turn it over to JP.
That could also be used for removing gravel, soil, leveling of different sorts.
So
When we
don't. I'm sorry, JP, and I just don't know the inventory really well. Do we have a backhoe now, or we don't have one at all to move gravel and stuff like that? We
do have a backhoe now that's aging out.
Okay.
It's the backbone of our services, so we don't want to be caught with a backhoe that's down more than it's running. We're getting to the point where it just needs to be replaced, so we have that assurance.
Gotcha.
I have to look with somewhere. I think it's approximately 7 to 9 years old. I can get the date on that exactly. I don't have it with me. We just replace the cylinders on the bucket itself, and once you get to that point, then there's a number of other things that usually fall behind it.
Yeah, I guess that's helpful. I mean, to the extent we're using it for snow removal, I wouldn't. If that was the primary motivation, I wouldn't be on board with that. I would just tell people to sit in their house for a day or two till it melts.
The primary use is leaf and limb removal.
There you go. Okay, then we might want to rewrite that just to be clear on that.
Yeah, I had a question. When we're doing, I don't have the word right now, but when we're leveling out the beach, when we get the
Escarpment.
Who does that? Do we do that or do we have Wayne do that? Or do we?
We usually contract that out, Island Contracting that requires a bulldozer with a blade.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Next slide, looking at contingency. It was included at 575,000 or 3.1% of the total budget. Comparative to current FY 26, that's a reduction of about 28,000. Just to remind, contingency appropriations shall not exceed 5% of the total of all other appropriations in the same fund. And this is proposed in the FY 27 is 3%. Another just reminder on that for contingency that provides a planned controlled funding source for unexpected or time-sensitive needs. It helps to reduce reliance on fund balance for smaller unplanned expenses, protects council-approved budget priorities from mid-year reallocations, enables timely response to emergencies, repairs, and operational needs, maintains service continuity despite unforeseen costs or disruptions. I think I wanted to highlight the last two, the one ensuring transparent oversight through council-approved uses only. So council, if we need contingency monies, you all would have to approve that. Staff couldn't unilaterally make the decision to pull from that. And then any unused funds, we would roll into the fund balance at the end of the year. So that can be a mechanism to help build up that fund balance.
Is that the capital reserve fund?
No, the capital reserve fund is a separate, distinct fund that, like with the current fiscal year, council approved appropriating 1 cent.
Yep.
Of the revenues being transferred into that fund. So that's something separate.
So then I don't.
Outside of the general fund, so the contingency being a part of the general fund. And if, revenues come in higher at the end of the year than what we expected them to, and if their expenses are lower, that surplus amount of funds goes into the fund balance of the general.
So I'm looking at the general fund capital outlay, not in there. General fund, where does it go? Like if I look at, just flipping back through everything else that we had.
So the fund balance is like your net position, right? So it's your.
So it's just more money that just is just cash. It doesn't necessarily go anywhere.
It's in the general fund and it's available to spend contingent on its restricted, right? It's restricted.
Right. Now, if we don't spend it, what happens to it?
It just sits there for waiting for you.
Well, no,
But eventually
we have $5 in our hand and we go into the next year. Where do the $5 go?
It stays in your hand. It's just a different year. Like it's in your coffers.
But it doesn't go back into the general fund?
Yes.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so here it's in contingency and the contingency. I'm where you are sort of. It's like, oh, if I got this contingency, I didn't spend it this year. Then it's in the general fund that we're using for budget. And for this year, we have money left over in the general fund.
So if you have money left over, it has to go somewhere. I would assume that it then goes into that capital reserve fund. Where else?
It goes into the contingent. It goes into the general fund.
Yeah,
Is
general
like your checking account or whatever, and so it's sitting there, and you're budgeting a certain amount out of it every year and a certain amount into it every year. If you have something left over, it stays there. If you use too much, it comes out. I mean, it's just basically your checking account balance.
How much do we have in contingency now?
In the general fund balance, I think our last number would be March financials. As of end of March, it was 14.4 million. But remember, that number is going to go down until we get to the end of the fiscal year because all of our tax revenue comes in January, February. So we're spending out of fund balance until the end of the year.
So Zach,
Okay.
how much do you think the balance will be there at the end of the fiscal year?
Back of the napkin, is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
fine.
Roughly maybe 10.
So we have a $10 million balance in contingency, and we're gonna potentially add to that by,
10 million in fund balance.
In fund balance,
I'm-
non-contingency.
And if we don't spend that contingency, it'll just roll back into the fund balance.
Yeah, and what it does, I mean, it takes current year revenues and helps you, one, plan out, if something happens, we have 580,000 or 575,000 in the current fiscal year that we can allocate quickly if you have something come up, right, that's not already appropriated.
Yeah.
And then if you don't, like we're doing this year, we won't have anything appropriated for it, that money goes into the fund balance, but it's budgeted against current year revenues. So it's money coming in
right.
into the,
So I'd like to wash it of the revenues that are coming in that we're gonna spend, because here's how much we're taking in, here's how much we plan on spending. There's then some amount of contingency, which is a differential, right? Net it all out, there's a contingency, and there was a contingency last year, right? So what is the net contingency amount that we have? I understand that you have some timing issues around when stuff comes in, but the accounting would still track how much contingency we have. And where I'm going with this, Zach, is ultimately I want to figure out how much of the contingency do we actually spend each year? Or is there a substantial net balance of contingency?
It's tough to.
Jesse, I think you're
There's
asking
a
if
$10 million
if it
there's-
accrues year to year, and it doesn't.
I'm sorry,
It's, so example, we got 604,000. When you say how much are we going to spend, we don't necessarily know, right? Because these are unplanned things. We could get to the end of this current fiscal year and not have to spend any of that money. So that it just goes back into the fund balance.
Which would mean that we have, but in fiscal 25, did we spend our contingency?
26.
25.
no, the year before last.
So Zach, I'm actually not asking that question. What I'm asking is, what I'm trying to get to is what's the net contingency that we have? So, because this contingency.
We have $10 million.
Well,
I mean,
that's
it's grown over time, a long time, but that's the only way it's going to get there.
Well, if I just want to make sure that's what he said. I heard him say that, then I heard you say that that's actually revenues, that's tax revenues that we're going to spend this year. So we should be able to isolate. And if you're not comfortable doing it here, then take some time separately, please, and do it. What's the amount we have as contingency as a village? And if you're not comfortable, don't let me put, it sounds like this is not something you've been asked to do before. So if that's the case.
And I think it may just warrant a discussion on the fund balances and the policies that we have in place, right? For like appropriated, assigned, and our minimal threshold too, right? I mean, I understand the concept of the carryover year to year, right? But we can follow up after. That's okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah, Zach,
Scott,
let me-
I didn't mean to cut you. Yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut
No,
you guys
that's
off.
not, let me just ask a couple of questions. One is, I think that has there been an amount that the council in the past has looked at and said, this is the amount of money we need to have in our general fund balance at the end of a fiscal year in order to feel safe that we've got enough money on hand for emergencies?
Yeah, I think just off the top of my head, the fund balance policy itself, I believe, is 32% total fund balance. But give me just 1 second.
So in your
So
monthly.
that would be 32% of your annual revenue, annual expenses budgeted you'd want to have in your fund balance.
That's my understanding. Give me one.
I get you like 8.5 million.
Like in the monthly financials, we've got that graph. It shows those thresholds where we want to fall relative to our fund balance policy. If you recall.
But our
Yeah.
fund balance policy is greater than the state requirements, minimums.
Mhm.
So we've already put more contingency in there by adopting a higher threshold than the state minimums.
Yeah, the bottom line for this on me, and I think I sent this in the email that y'all probably got, is that if we have more money in the general fund balance, then we think we need to be safe. And we have a budget that we feel like is either accurate or conservative, which we typically are. I think that the question is, should we be raising tax money? Because the contingency is dollar for dollar coming out of the taxes. Should we be raising tax money in order to add to our general fund balance? And I understand the idea of the contingency, but isn't it just as easy for the council to allocate in a need? If we have an unbudgeted need, isn't it just as easy for the council to allocate from the general fund balance as it is from the contingency in the budget?
From my vantage point, it's just a budget amendment and we would have to approve it. So going back to those last two bullets, ensuring the transparent oversight through council approved uses only. That's true whether or not we pull it from a contingency fund or we just do a budget amendment.
Right. And so, if we have a fund balance that's generating, if it's $10 million, it should be generating, $400,000 a year, $300,000 a year in interest, which I know we have in our budget. But it seems to me like we have enough money there to cover a contingency without continuing to build those funds through collecting more taxes.
Which brings us all, Zach, I think you're going to be most comfortable having this conversation if you were able to isolate the amount of contingency. So
I think what he's asking for is what's that number of unassigned fund balance that's available to spend, right?
That's right.
I guess you could
That's
say
basically a
That's
contingency because we're over. Right. So do you
What's
need a
that money?
contingency on top of the
Because
already built-in contingency?
Because don't forget, in the fund balance amount, there are calculations there that have monies restricted for certain purposes that can be used, right? So not that whole 10.
Right, which is why to isolate the contingency element. And based on what I heard you say earlier, I'm guessing it's about 8.5 million, but
Not the unassigned part, just the total overall.
okay.
Yeah.
But
So-
if we look at it from last year, for instance, we had a budget with a $601,000 contingency or whatever it was, and as I understand it, we haven't used any, or we certainly haven't used very much of that. And so, if that money's going into the fund, why would we still need to have 500,000 this year? Why wouldn't we say, great, we didn't use last year's? Why don't we just keep that and that becomes this year's contingency? We take it out of the budget, and next year we may have to look at it and we may use $700,000 out of the fund because we have some issues, and at that point we have to rebuild the fund and we have to build the contingency back in.
Yeah, I guess ultimately it goes down to what is the unused, unrestricted fund balance, because in 20 plus years of doing budgets, I mean, there was a period of time where we did not have a contingency built
Yeah,
into it.
and I think
There
you're
was a period
right.
of time
And I
that
think
there was a period of time where we would use a fund balance appropriation to balance the budget.
For capital items.
yes.
So that's a caveat here, is that your fund balance should technically only be used for, if there's restricted purposes there, but also capital outlay only. Side of contingency is that council could change that appropriation from contingency to an operating expense with current year revenue. So it's not just restricted to capital costs, right? But if you had operating costs or you had something come in that you weren't expecting that you needed to take care of, I'm thinking more tree cutting or, right of way maintenance.
Pushing sand, scarring down on the V.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. When did we initiate contingency? That wasn't that long ago,
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
But there's no way it could be 8.5 billion.
Yeah, so we don't have a track. We have this year's track record and the year before. Is there any merit in saying, yeah, we have this amount and let's start weaning ourselves from the contingency concept, which rather than just doing it flat out, hey, let's not have it. Maybe instead of, dropping, what we drop?
It's 3%.
Yeah. So, no, I don't mean that. I mean, what was the difference between last year and this year?
I think it's 30 grand.
30 grand. So, if you turn around, it's like, okay, 30 grand is a concert series. Let's drop the contingency by, it's just a reference, but you drop by 200,000, and so you still have the contingency, and there's another trial year.
Yeah.
Maybe next year we don't have it at all. But rather than saying, look, I don't think we need it, let's not do this, is a more conservative approach, is to wean ourselves from it.
What I guess the question I'd have is, we're weaning ourselves from something we're not using. So what if we
Well,
don't
and
need,
We're not using
honestly-
it. We're almost like we're not using it. God, I'm glad we didn't have to use it.
no,
The
it's
whole
great.
idea of the
Wait.
concept-
This is-
That's not right, guys. Hang on. Like, let's remind ourselves, and we can pull it up. We did end up using some of it, but again, we didn't use it for contingency. We used it for, things that were known, right? One of the things we used it for, I think the first thing we used it for was replacing boards on the timber bridge, because we didn't put anything in the budget for roads that year because we had moved more stuff towards legal, right? And so that was, my initial, resistance to this is that we weren't using it truly for contingencies. We were using it for budgeting errors that we knowingly made. And so, we did use some of it, but it was again, it wasn't contingencies. It was for known things we had to do. And again, we could have got there the same way by just doing a budget amendment, and probably would have had more discussion about it and sharpened our pencils better on the budgeting process.
Yeah, I guess
I say
one of
that
the
I
things
just offer that up as perspective, Peter. I whether we wean off of it or get rid of it, obviously I'm not a proponent of having this, because the last
I
time
got it.
So, yeah, going back to that, as I recall, on the timber bridge, we did have some funds budgeted to do a portion of the bridge. And I think the opportunity presented itself to be able to knock the whole bridge out, that with the contractor available, and just to go ahead and knock it all out and get it done and over with. And that was the reason that we went to the contingency, to get the additional funds to do it. So, I mean,
wouldn't that be the
notwithstanding,
perfect-
Scott, I agree with you that a big part of that was because of how much money we had in legal, tied up in legal, that we weren't able to, we're trying to balance the budget. And so that's,
I get it, Chris. I guess what I'm saying is the timber bridge the board replacement, we knew that was coming, right? And we were, however you want to say it, either we had only budgeted for a third of it, and boards don't wear out a third at a time. We know that. We had enough run with that. But however we got there, that, and like, let's not get myopic and focus on that. But again, like this idea that we had this contingency, and it only happened when we had a once in 1,000-year storm that we tapped into it. No, that's not how it's been used in the couple of years that we've had it. We've used it for timber bridge. We've used it for some legal expense.
Scott, I guess the question would be, it seems to me like if you had zero contingency and you still had this timber bridge issue come up, you could just go to the general fund balance and say,
that's what I'm saying. Yep.
In that case, that would be a capital expense that you'd be paying right out of the general fund.
Yes.
That would certainly fit the criteria for, and I don't know if that's a legal criteria or it's just our criteria, whether it can be used for anything or not. But I'm assuming that if we had a dire emergency, we could use the general fund for whatever we need it for, because otherwise we don't need one.
Yep.
So
Agreed.
I just don't see why this would represent basically 3 cents per hundred of taxes that we're collecting from people, and we have absolutely no idea what we're going to use it for.
Wait, so let's clarify. Are we talking about, I'm not so worried about a classification issue as I am about the gross amounts. So Slaughter, what you just said would be a change in taxes if we eliminate this contingency. But then that's not what I heard Scott say. What I heard Scott say was that just go into the general fund and leave taxes as they are. And for what it's worth, I am supportive of a budget with some amount of contingency because you never get it dead nuts right.
You misunderstood, Jesse. Then, I would propose doing away with this as well, because I don't think we need it. And the other thing that I think Chris and his team does a really good job on is they're very conservative on estimating what costs are going to be for things. And the most recent example, that was on the public safety vehicles, right? Because didn't we end up doing like a $300,000 transfer because they ended up being about $300,000 less than what we thought they were going to end up being? Isn't that right? And we did a transfer back for those.
So Scott,
so I think if you're conservative in estimating what your costs are going to be, and Chris and team are very good at doing that, you're probably going to always, over, with, budget for those. And we have a good general fund balance of unallocated money, which we do, then we don't need this additionally. And I would get rid of this. And our history has been that we haven't used it for what I would call true contingencies anyways.
And so is that to say that you think that get rid of this and lower taxes to by the same amount?
Yeah, I will. As it relates to this item, now we might well, as we go through the rest of this exercise, we may not give it all back because we may find somewhere else, like the roads conversation we just had. We may say, really, we should do more on that. But as it relates to this item, I think this should be a 3 cent give back to the island, residents. Because
so then that leads me to one further question. Can we move taxes that much in every year? I mean, we do that?
We moved them up that much.
Let me think. We historically have never had a tax rate reduction to that degree. Like,
got it. But we can. I mean, every year we come back.
Yes.
Okay.
But and Scott, they're right.
I don't think we want a situation where we're bouncing. We don't want to be bouncing from 50 cents per hundred to 70 cents per hundred to 62 cents per. We need to have some expectation, but I don't think we also should be not lowering taxes because we don't feel like, because it seems like it's too much lowering. I mean, the taxes should be the fill-in number at the end where we say this is absolutely what we need to spend, and this is how much it's going to cost us in taxes to spend that much. And the only time we should be, trying to change things based on taxes is we got down to the end and we said, wow, that's going to take a 10% tax increase. What can we cut to not have it be that big? But I would never go into the case saying, gee, it's a 10% tax decrease. What can we add back in so we don't have that big of a decrease? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, if you guys are worried about carrying the message of reducing taxes, I'm happy to carry the log on that.
No, that's not.
I've got some of that.
Mine is just more. Mine is just more to clarify this, because you spend 100%, whatever the spend number is, and we're talking a lot about classification. I'm not so concerned about classification. I'm concerned about, how much we're spending, so I need to learn more about what budget goes where and what category goes where. Well, but it sounds like if I summarize
the simple thing is, Jesse, every dollar you cut from your spending is a dollar you don't have to raise in taxes. It doesn't exactly work out that way, but that's basically the right answer. That's what I mean. If you don't have to have taxes, I mean, for every dollar when I say raise, I mean earn, pull, charge. I don't know what the right word is. So if you can save $1 million in your budget, that's $1 million less taxes people need to pay to balance the budget that year.
Yeah, and so just one further thing, again, my education. when we're done with the budget, then you calculate what the taxes are for everybody in Allen? Is that the process that goes through?
We incorporate the estimated tax rate into the budget. Like it's already in there now. I'll make sure.
Well, so let me put it differently. So at my house, you're gonna send me a tax bill that's a function of what the budget is?
Yes.
Okay.
But there's some portion of that's county.
Yeah, I got that too. Yep. Okay.
But, and just in all of this contingency discussion, I'm conservative and I'd rather have some money, extra money laying around is a poor way to express it, extra money in the pot if we need it. If we're not going to do a contingency, then I'd like to build up some more reserves. I just think it's a good idea to have money available. The nice part about contingency and the reason we went to it is that we're not constrained. There are a lot of rules in government about how you spend your money that aren't true in the private sector. And if something happens that we don't see coming down the road, for example, you can't get insurance on your buildings anymore on the coast. So what do? We have to self-insure. That's a contingency, or it could be a capital fund, but we need to have some reserves. I think we could talk about the level of those reserves and how much money that should be, but I think we should be responsible about making sure we have money available if necessary.
But
Yeah.
didn't we do that?
I guess
Didn't we do that by adopting a reserve policy that's well north of what the state already requires?
Well, what the state requires and what it's like on a barrier island, and that they may be two different things.
They are, and
Well,
that's why
I
I think
understand
that's why I
that.
think we got there, right? That's why we came up with a different policy, but we're in excess of that too.
So just let's wind this up because I think we're all hearing each other. So right now we have conservative budgeting. So by doing that, we have some contingency kind of built in our story. We have a percentage that is beyond what is required for reserve in our general fund. So there's another contingency and we have a contingency. And so basically what we're talking about is redundancy to cover our ass, and cover our ass 3 times. I think that's basically what we're discussing here. And the question is, how much cover do we really need?
And are we debating that here, or is we just learning here?
Well, I think we're learning here, but at the same time, we're given direction to staff to take this, what they hear us saying is like, you know what? They tell us over and over again, we got everything covered and maybe we don't need this, contingency at all.
Well, but
Is basically what's being said.
let's give them a chance to look at it.
Yeah, and I think that's what, when you're asking Zach to do the exercise.
Right.
And I think when we're looking at some of our other things, we just got done talking about whether 300 was the right number for paving. And it's like, well, if we can get rid of this contingency and the reality is that 300 is not the right number, it should be 4. I think we want to be sending them back with that information. This is a workshop. It's not
Mhm.
final decision. So I think
Okay.
we're giving them input, and I think the input we just gave them is to look at how conservative we are, how much redundancy we have in contingency. Okay, am I wrong?
Yeah, so it sounds to me like, Peter, if we could get an understanding of what we think the general fund balance would be at the end of this year, this fiscal year 26, how much of that is reserved, what our budget, what our general fund balance policy is, and what our minimum is that we need to meet that policy, and then what's left. I think that information would be really helpful in understanding where we fall with contingency, because that's, next year when we go through this, I'd want to see that same stuff. And if we are under reserved, then I would say at that point we would want to include a contingency. But at this point, it seems to me like we probably have more money in the general fund than we have certainly plans to use, and certainly that our policy would require. And so I don't understand why we would add money to this budget that would potentially increase that.
Yeah. So they've got that, you got that storyline, right? Okay.
Yeah, so what we'll plan to do is work through that and may follow up with an email to all to show you where that all sits. And then based on that, Zach and I can look at the current contingencies amount to determine, do we need any? Do we need some, or do we need any? Or as we continue with this workshop, if we identify some other things that aren't in this proposed budget, for example, the UDO,
Right.
that we could use some of those monies for to tackle this, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
One thing to add, Jesse, as far as the tax rates, as I mentioned at the council meeting, the General Assembly is looking at the possibility of regulating local government's ability to tax by increasing taxes.
Yep.
I've never not heard him say anything about reducing taxes. Increasing taxes, yes, and even to the extent that that might require a referendum of the municipal voters to approve the tax rate increase as part of the budget process. So that gives me and Zach, you know, what's the right word? Heartburn?
I was gonna say angst.
Yeah, like, can you imagine how difficult that might be?
And the underlying issue there is, because I've been in conversations with the list counties in like Mecklenburg County, Charlotte. How are you going to limit Mecklenburg County, right? The same way you mandate Faulhead Island, right? There's two different.
Right.
Yeah. It's small, it's not. Right? So.
Moving on.
Where do we, I've got a couple of just broader topics and I don't want to stop the presentation. Should we just wait till the end for those?
Yeah, possibly, Slaughter at this point to.
That's fine. Let's go ahead and go through this because I think we're not going to make any changes based on my comments, I'm sure.
Just general fund highlights, looking at the tax rate reduction at 0.0257. This includes decreases in unrestricted revenues of 330,000. Decrease in restricted revenues of 700,000. These are for one-time prior year payment of funds. And then a 520,000 fund balance appropriation, most of which 403,000 for public safety vehicle debt service. Next, we're going to move into the revenue side. This next slide just shows, the table just shows different types of revenues by class. The predominant one being the ad valorem tax and showing the difference between current fiscal year and projected FY27 amongst all those revenue streams. In sum total, about a 5% decrease in revenues. And we'll get into some of that in more detail.
I'm surprised that ad valorem taxes are going down slightly because of the new homes on the island. More people, more properties.
Well, yeah, because it has the tax rate deduction built into it.
Okay.
So that if you see there, it's a 1% decrease. We're lowering taxes by almost 2.5 over 65.
So as I'm seeing this, the pieces to me that I don't understand completely are the transfers in and the restricted. I'm assuming those are the grants mainly that we got.
Can you ask that one more time, sorry?
The
transfers in and restricted.
Transfers in and restricted. The transfers in and restricted. I don't understand what those are, and I know they're going down. I just don't know. I don't know what they are.
Well, we've got some slides specific to those as we move through the revenue. So
good.
just stand by.
I'm glad you've anticipated every question I've had so far, which is good.
Okay. All right. Okay. Next slide just acknowledges the percentage of ad valorem taxes being 2/3 of the general fund's revenues, and then the other 1/3 is comprised of all the other revenue streams. Here you see the unrestricted revenue classifications. These here highlighted for a total of 13.8 million. And what those include, including miscellaneous revenues for special events, revenues, sales tax, utilities, franchise taxes, etc. Looking at the revenue classes, the table on the top left is the revenue, and then the arrow pointing to the table below is the associated expenditure appropriations within each department of those revenues. So again, public safety, the obvious highest at 30%, moving on down to public works and debt service, making up 68% of the unrestricted revenues. The effect of new tax rate on property tax bills, again, as it sits with the current recommended reduction of 0.0257, if we take an estimated average home value of 1.38 million, showing the current tax levy relative to the proposed tax levy, the annual difference of $356 and reduced taxes to the village. And I think Zach had mentioned previously, 1 penny on the tax rate is about $196,000 in tax revenue. Here we get into the general fund's revenues, and I'll turn it over to Zach to talk in more specifics about transfers in.
Sure. So the transfers in, it's just the revenues that come into the general fund from the other funds. And really what this includes is our BRAT fund transfer, the accommodation taxes into the general fund to be used for shoreline and GO bond debt repayment. And this in FY27, we have it at 1.65 million for that necessary transfer.
Yeah. Oh, one more.
No, this is fine. And so I think this slide will just highlighted here that the supports the shoreline department and helps to reduce the overall tax rate by about 4 cents to help with that GO bond debt service.
And so that transfers in, is that lower than last year?
Yes, sir. And the reason being, don't forget, we transferred a large amount from the capital project fund we closed for the dredging into the BRAT fund and then into the general fund to help with the debt service payments this year. Because we have GO bond left over and we applied that to the debt service payment. That's why that number is larger.
Okay. Okay. So that was kind of a one-time thing.
Yes, sir.
I got you. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Ray.
And then the restricted funds are, basically that they have specific purposes or limits on how they can be used. And that's your grant funds, your FEMA revenues, your intergovernmental funds, like our $325,000 that we get from the county for EMS services. And this just shows how that's distributed amongst that 535 you keep on. That's the makeup of the expenses. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know why these pie charts don't have words on them. I promise they do.
Yeah, they do in the printout.
Yeah. We'll make sure that's updated when we upload the file to the interweb. But here's the breakout and how each goes and what revenue source comprises those expenses. So the Brunswick County EMS Fire grant for $325 helps fund public safety. The Marina Channel grant at $150,000 for the shoreline dredging, the marina dredging channel, and then Public Works. POW bill is our road allocation appropriation from the state, as well as I think there's some mosquito grants in there, mosquito control grants, and then the solid waste disposal tax is included in that.
Are any of those soft? And soft might be the wrong word, but we're listing them like their revenue, but are any of those, Powell bill, can that disappear? Can any of these disappear?
So on the county, Brunswick County EMS revenues, we do yearly meet or submit our letter of request to Brunswick County. So that's coming from the county. So the
Right.
county commissioners have to approve that. So we, Buddy and I have conversations and we've submitted the letter of request. The Marina grant is a state grant and the state, they could, for all intent and purpose, I mean, that could change. So we don't really have much control over that one. The Powellville funds is a state one as well. Same, we get certain X amount per linear foot of paved roads on the island. That's how they derive that figure across the state.
So if they cut their budget, then our budget gets cut.
Right, and that's where I was going. So I don't want to be looking at this, this is our revenue, and all of a sudden, well, there's $200,000 less because somebody that we have no control over just pulled the strings. Yeah, okay.
So what, at it.
But to Peter's question, the soft part of that is the things that we don't know we're going to get yet that might end up in that, right? So if we
That's
apply for a grant or something along the way that is just not known to us right now, those would end up being in here.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, we typically don't budget for potential grant revenues.
No, it makes sense.
Agreed. And that's a conservative way to do it. I agree.
So if you look at last year, we had 1.229 in restricted. I'm assuming a big chunk of that was the FEMA money that came in to pay for the emergency vehicles.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's kind of it came in, it just went right back out, and it was sort of a one-time thing that was an expense that correlated almost exactly with that income, right? We've taken the income away, but we've also taken the expense away from this year's budget.
Got it.
Moving on, the next slide I have up with general fund revenue, sales and services, 46,000 projected. These are revenues for things that we sell or services that we provide in exchange for funds. This includes site rentals at the Marina Park, Timber Creek, sales of assets, and pickup and drop off of disposal services. And all these sales and services revenues goes toward funding expenditures and public works associated with the revenues.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
on this one, and this is more to have the conversation for education for maybe Jesse and Slaughter that maybe haven't done this as much. We're at Brunswick Electric anyways, we're seeing a huge uptick in like hundreds of thousands of dollars of selling old assets because like just the used vehicle market right now and the used vehicle market, particularly for old equipment, backhoes and bucket trucks and things like that, is really hot. And I know we've kind of in the past, and I'm not making a judgment on it, but it's an observation. We've been very generous, I think, as a community as far as maybe donating those things or not necessarily seeking the highest dollar on that. Should we change our posture? Like I'm thinking about our fire trucks. I think we gave those away. We had like the drone thing that came up a few years ago. I think we just kept the extra drone, some stuff like that I think there's real money in that if we, want to start, embarking on selling that. And I don't know if you guys have considered that at all, particularly as, budgets get tight and, revenue challenges are out there. If our posture should change at all on that.
Right.
I remember with respect to the fire trucks that there was no secondary market for those trucks. They were too old. We did talk about it.
Yeah, I recall some discussion, and I know one was donated to a community. And then the other.
West End. West End volunteer.
Okay. So we just donated it, and then the other one's going to Brunswick Community College. But the Scott's
For training, right?
Yeah, for training. But that's a fair question that Scott's asked, and I just, we can.
I mean, I'll tell you, we sell stuff that, I mean, I wouldn't even think you could push it off the lot, and people are paying a lot of money for it right now. And I can get you in touch with the service that we use, but we started using a new service, and here in Brunswick County, there is just an enormous appetite for any of those kind of, vehicles that, we have some boat, old rusty boats and stuff that we use to get to power lines, and people just scoop it up. So it could be another revenue stream if we wanted to engage on it. So I'm happy to help with it. I'm happy to help with it. I guess what I'm saying is I'm happy to help get you in line with some folks I think could, as we, disposition assets, they could get.
Okay, yeah, well, as we move forward, we'll look at that much closer, Scott, to figure out, because it may be on a per item assessment. Because, for example, with our pickup trucks, I know we first bring them into public safety, and then we transition those from public safety to public works. By the time public works gets done with them, they're in not so good condition.
Dude, I agree with you. We do the same thing, but I'm just telling you, there's a fertile market out there for it right now.
Got it. Next slide is general fund revenues on our permits and fees, projected at a little over $1 million. These are permits and fees that are collected in exchange for regulatory services or permissions, typically related to ordinances, zoning, construction standards, or licensing requirements. Examples are building permits, vehicle permits, creek access permits, and special use permits. So predominantly those on the building permits and vehicle permit side.
Chris, and I don't expect, maybe y'all have the time to do it, but in that number, are we including then like the revised fee schedule for ICE vehicles? Because that was going to give us, I think when we modeled that out, Zach, that gives us a little more revenue than what we had gotten in the past.
Yeah, Scott, I increased that line item to adjust for that.
Okay.
We took up so you're aware, the daily vehicles from the current budget, we took it up to about 133,000 to 350. And then for annual, we took it from 295 up to about 402,000. That's about 170,000 increase.
Okay.
This next slide just breaks out those revenues in terms of what department that generates those. So public safety, you've got EMS fees and golf cart registrations, development services, again with the building permits, CRB fees, special use permits, CAPA permits, the roads with the daily and annual, the transfer out for road paving,
Capital Reserve Fund,
excuse me, and then the daily and annual and creek access permits into public works that helps fund that department's work on right of way maintenance. Right.
With respect to building permits, do we project the same level of activity of new construction moving forward?
So even what did we that?
Yeah, it's pretty much in line with what our 2 to 3 year average has been. So kind of expecting it to stick about that. And if anything, I feel like it's going to get increased activity.
It'd be good to keep an eye on that one.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons.
All right, here's some of that detail on the ICE vehicle fees for the most recent council direction and approval of those proposed ICE fees in the table on the left, and how we broke that down between the categories 1, 2, and 3. Moving on to general fund revenues and contractor services, we're projecting about 755,000, and these revenues support the expenses of running the contractor services facility, which will include provides parking, fuel cells, storage, container rentals, and access to restrooms and break rooms. And these fees also cover the debt service associated with the construction of the storage units down here in the bottom right at about $129,000. In this proposed budget on the revenues, we're looking to propose increases to rental fees and contractor services. So this table reflects that with, the fee name, what we charge for, whether it's ICE vehicle parking or annual, monthly, or daily, golf cart parking, annual or monthly, storage bins, rental, and storage unit rental. The difference, the bins are the old Connex containers versus the storage unit facility that we constructed. So that's why there's the difference and the rents there. I think they're pretty modest increases. So
Do we increase them annually or just once in a while?
This is actually the first time in the last couple of years we've reviewed them for, where do we need more revenue coming in to help offset maintenance on the bill. So
putting, maintaining the parking lot area.
Mhm.
Moving on to general fund revenues with the IPC, we're projecting about 417,000 in revenues, and that's primarily from processing of the packages through FedEx, UPS, and USPS. These help fund the operations, including staffing and maintenance, postal services, with any shortfall supplemented by the village's general fund. I know, Scott, you had a point or you had mentioned of staff trying to figure out a way to reduce that required supplement of the general fund. And, we know the issues and the challenges that we're being faced with regards to Amazon moving from UPS and going to USPS and how that affects our revenues, given that we get a per package rate on the UPS package. If it's coming to USPS, it's just a straight annual contract. We don't get paid on a per package rate. And so that's the crux of it. And
yeah, I guess I had a question, and I don't know anything about this space. So if it's from complete left field, go ahead and tell me. But is there a way, because we're not, we're not a post office per se, we're a private thing. Can we not do like a user based kind of passing along that fee somehow? Because I reflect on it. I can only ever get there on the weekends, right? Because I work during the week, and every time I go there on the weekend, I feel bad for the guys there, because it'll be somebody with one of the businesses in front of me that comes and gets 20, 30, 40 packages, right? And they're just I don't want to say overusing it, but they're disproportionately using it than island residents, but island residents are shouldering the expense for that. And so I don't know if there's a way to, again, just make the cost of the service reflect more like what people are using, and I don't even know what that would look like. And it may not even be possible, but I just real world observation. That's what's going on, is the businesses are just shipping a ton of stuff there and gumming it up.
Yeah, that's been recognized previously. I'd say a couple of things as far as how packages are delivered through USPS, that we're a contract postal unit. So we actually have a contract with the United States Postal Service. So we're pretty limited in terms of what we can or can't do relative to adding a user fee on top of that. I think what was the other?
So I guess maybe that's the answer. So does USPS contract prohibit us from doing any kind of, end user fee for, I don't know, packages in excess of a certain size or in excess of a certain volume or anything like that.
Say again, I can't.
I'm sorry, we're not aware of any, I don't believe we can add any additional fees to what is already classified or charged per USPS rates.
Can we look at that contract and maybe just give it an extra scrutiny just to make sure? And then I guess the flip side of it, all right, maybe it's not on their service, but like, do we entertain, I assume USPS doesn't govern what we charge for, boxes or accounts there or something, but is there, certainly we know the flows that are coming through on people's, and if you see one of these, accounts that's getting, literally thousands of packages, are we not within our rights to say, look, to have an account with us, right, independent of USPS, right? There's, some nominal fee for that, because again,
let us
we're subsidizing the businesses.
Let us take a look, Scott. I mean, it probably won't solve this for what we've got in the budget.
Correct. Yep.
But let us take a look at USPS and the FedEx and UPS contracts to see if there's any opportunity. How about that?
Yeah, that'd be great. I don't want to lose sight of it, right? Because it's going to continue to grow. And again, I'm like Peter. I want to have that as a service for folks that visit here, but it's also not fair to keep just having all the homeowners subsidize the logistics of the businesses on the business or on the island.
Jay, do you know, I'm looking for an added service, which is what you're kind of describing, Scott. But if people are coming in and you're getting a big load, they're looking for their load on Saturdays. That means we've been holding it for X number of days. Is there any way that we could charge for holding packages? I mean, it goes to the vacationers too, who, ship a bunch of stuff and then pick it up when they show up, which might be 2 weeks later.
Let's see, we have.
Yeah, so I don't know of a situation where we would charge for a storage space. I get where you're coming from.
I'm just looking, we're looking at revenue, and if we're doing something that we're basically losing money by doing it, the question I think that Scott's asking is, well, are we not charging for something? And if the practice is that, companies are having all their stuff shipped here, and then they're picking it up at the end of the week, does that mean that we've been holding it for them? And that has nothing to do with I just would like you to think about that.
Yeah. I mean, we have a policy where packages, if they are in our facility for X number of days, we return to sender. That's one. Because
I think that's longer though. That's like 30 or 60 days.
It's 30 days.
30.
Yes, 30 days.
Okay. Well, because one thing is, I don't know that we want to be in the business of holding their packages, because we want the packages to come in and get out as soon as possible.
But I think my question is whether we are in the service, whether we want it or not. And if we are in the service and we are holding packages, can we be charging people for that? And if we're charging them, they'll probably go out faster.
Okay. Check on those as we try to work through that. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Next slide is the general funds revenues with appropriated fund balance. Looking at $519,000. The budget. This again to fund the debt for the public safety vehicles, some capital outlay items not covered by the current year revenues, and some restricted funds from the Development Services Department fund balance. So general fund summary. Total budget's $18.8 million. That's a 5.1% decrease of $1 million from prior year. Tax rate decrease presently at 0.0257. Fund balance appropriations utilized to support capital outlay bolster development services, and cover debt service for public safety vehicles. Key points, all debt service obligations are fully funded, includes 1.5 FTEs requested, and new capital outlay requests are funded. Next, we'll do the utilities fund. The overview of the utilities fund is support the operation, maintenance, and capital needs of the village's water and wastewater systems. Ensures the safe delivery of drinking water and the effective treatment of wastewater in compliance with regulatory standards. For FY27, the fund reflects strategic investments and system upgrades, including a major focus on capital outlay items, operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. The major components include on the water department side, budget increase of $417,000 to support system improvements through the capital outlay and operational and personnel needs. On the wastewater side, looking at an increase of $492,000 for maintenance infrastructure upgrades by capital outlay, about $432,000. To support these, we've incorporated modest rate increases as proposed to be implemented in accordance with the village's recently completed rate study across the water, sewer, and other utility fees. Just want to highlight some of the groundwork we did over the last 10 months, or with advancing our wastewater system resiliency with infiltration reduction, with the implementation of the grinder pump upgrades and snorkel riser extensions. The system-wide smoke testing program we completed, targeting smoke testing to identify other cracks and leaks within the system, further contributing to I&I. Public education, continue with ongoing outreach initiatives to educate island homeowners to reduce blockages and emergency overflows, unnecessary wear on pumps and the wastewater treatment plant infrastructure. So water system reliability and monitoring, that AMI implementation with the radio read meter system that gives us real-time usage and tracking to improve leak detection and enhance our operational efficiency across the water system. And then the hydrant system improvements, which is a multi-year program where we're continuing to refurbish and replace fire hydrants. And then the capital improvement program and advancement that we've been working on.
So this is one of those areas where I think about, we were discussing like contingency or capital reserves, whatever. We know we have a really big project ahead. And shouldn't we be anticipating that? Not, I know we're never going to pay for it with usage fees as we go down the road, but we could at least start to get a little bit of money set aside for projects in advance to get things ready.
Right. Yeah, the conundrum with that there is that talking about a separate fund outside of the general fund budget, which uses taxes and the tax rate to generate the revenue versus generating revenue in this separate enterprise fund, that we'd have to either increase the rates or increase the debt to generate that.
That does create a problem. And I think it's better to assess the users of the new system rather than current people.
So looking at the utilities fund revenues, where it's broken down with what between the water and sewer. The sewer side with the revenue generator in terms of this water. Sorry. Different colors. I got off there. Good catch. Yeah. Fix that. But sorry. So water service, predominantly with generating the revenues for water service and taps, and then the sewer service and sewer taps. Looking at
Hey, Chris,
yes.
Can you remind me why the difference in the taps, and is it just because of the expense of removing like the transportation expense of removing the dry sewage stuff?
I might need JP to speak to the differentiation.
Sorry for using the technical term sewage stuff. I know there's a number for it or a name for it.
So I think what you're asking, Scott, is the differentiation in revenues generated between water taps and sewer taps, and why is there that?
I got that. So the difference there is that the sewer taps include the customer connection charge, which is what every individual has to pay to tap onto, obviously tap onto the system, but there's a customer connection charge in addition to the actual tap fee that people have to pay. Yeah.
The reason for that increased extra charge is because we own that going forward. All pump replacements and things, all repairs are on us going forward. So that's why that fee is added.
Is that different than for water?
Yeah, there's not as many moving parts. Yes.
Got it. Okay. That's what I was looking for. Thanks.
A water meter versus a grinder, pump, and wet well.
Got it. Yep. Okay. Makes sense.
All right. So in sum total between current fiscal year and projected FY27, about an $800,000 increase in revenues. To generate those revenues, we've included the proposed rate increases from the CIP or rate study, with 5.5% to all water charge fees. And if you recall, there was the new tier that we added. So the table below has the fee name, the current rate, and then the proposed rate, and what the proposed increase of each. So that new tier, with usage greater than 11,000 gallons, being $15 per 1,000 gallons of use on that. So also we went 5.5% water, sewer, and the debt capital surcharge, and then 3% to all other utility rates.
We want to talk about the debt capital surcharge and how future years we plan to separate those.
Go ahead.
Okay. So at the retreat, it was brought up about how the debt capital surcharge, it shouldn't remain, it shouldn't increase 5% every year after year. And I think the resolution to that is to make sure we separate that in future years into two separate charges, one being a capital charge and one being a debt surcharge. That way, when we take out $40 million in revenue bonds, and we get a stagnant loan payment to where it stays the same over time, that fee should not necessarily increase over time as well.
Right.
It should be the amount, calculated with that annual payment, right, broken down each year. So we plan on separating those out because your capital cost probably should increase by 5% every year. Just throwing that out there.
I know you have the residential irrigation rate here. I heard in the outing, the retreat, that we have a certain number of homes that have a separate meter for irrigation, but it sounds like a fairly small number.
Yeah, have that.
That's looking it up.
Yeah, the separate meter for irrigation, that's required now, isn't it?
Yeah, the last time we had a serious drought, that became a state mandate that they had this.
And I understand the idea. I'm glad we have it. But it's a little bit unfair to the people that don't have it, right?
They paid for the tap fee,
Right.
for the irrigation tap fee.
The people that have it paid for the irrigation tap fee, but could somebody else come and say, hey, I want to pay for the irrigation tap fee and get my irrigation at a reduced rate?
JP
Maybe
said
it's not. Maybe it's not reduced, actually. I don't know.
JP said yes.
Okay. So somebody says, hey, I hear this person's getting a cheaper rate from that. Okay. That makes sense. All right. Got it.
We're not subsidizing the rate. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a quick question too. So when we're looking at commercial tap fees, et cetera, are they at the same rate as residential, but size based on the
Size base
they're size based? Okay.
In RU, right?
and REUs. That's the big difference.
They're applied to a residential equivalent unit.
Okay, well, that was what my
So the
question was.
screen that's per 1,000 units is also per RU.
And Slaughter, to answer your question, there's about 200 irrigation meters in the village.
Thanks.
So this just shows the new minimum utility monthly bill, not including stormwater, with the proposed rates on the base. On the expenditure side, looking at 5.15 million, that's an increase of just under 800,000. Predominantly on the sewer side with sewer expenditures. This next slide shows the expenses by function with personnel, operating, and capital. And the variance of those. The 417,000 increase. How those are funded through the water service fees, water tap fees, etc. Say the 417,000 is to support capital needs and system improvements. On the wastewater side, similar table showing the personal operating and capital and variance between current fiscal year and FY27 of about 492,000. And again, how those are funded through sewer service, sewer taps, etc. And the 492,000 to support infrastructure upgrades and initial implementation of the village's utility capital improvement plan. There's no
Before you move on, so as I catching up here. So I understand we wanted to upgrade our lift stations across the island, and there was some talk I heard. I'm getting this wrong, I'm sure. I summarize it that we pushed back our schedule of doing that. So this reflects the revised.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that.
Okay, gotcha.
After this slide. All right. So here's the capital outlay items, the water department on the left and the sewer on the right. Just the asterisk reflects those items that are in that CIP on both sides. And in particular, on the lift station maintenance phase 4, we've included 150,000 to do that one on South Bald Head Wine, which will be the last of the larger lift stations with the larger horsepower pump system. And so, staff, myself, Zach, JP, we sort of we huddled up and talked and recommended, based on how the output of the CIP, that we move forward aligning the remaining station improvements with the CIP. So it's going to spread that out over a longer term. We've got, let's see here. So we'll have, after South Bald Head Wine, we'll have 5 more lift stations that are all of them are 2 horsepower, except with one, which is a 3 horsepower. And so as we annually assess that, because again, just to reemphasize, none of the lift stations in these refurbishments have been time sensitive or critical in terms of a failure point. It's all been, once we paid off the debt from acquiring the wastewater treatment plant back in 2005, we took the debt funds and started applying them as a pay-as-you-go, reinvest into the system. And then, so we started out with a phased program where we were pretty aggressive, starting out with 5 lift stations over a 3-year period. Well, this was coming into 2020 and COVID, and, things out of our control. We pushed that to doing 3 per year over 5 years. And so that's how we've been managing it up to this point. Well, with the evolution of the CIP program, and putting that into the program, that's what we're recommending to finish out the remainder of those lift stations.
So how nervous are we that something goes bad and
I can let JP speak to that.
I mean, I realize I'm not asking for a guarantee. Don't lay down your first kid or anything, but
When we first went, first laid this out, first planned this out, we had some hurdles. We went from a 3-year plan to a 5-year. But the whole idea was a snapshot in time of what each lift station looked like. So we've worked the hard ones. We've had to move some up. We've had to do things. We had to pay an extra mobilization one time to get some work done earlier than we thought. We already had the parts here because we identified it. So the short answer is no, we're not nervous about it. We evaluated and we currently evaluate all these lift stations from year to year, from every week, and we feel comfortable with this approach.
and then JP, you also have each house has a grinder pump that's owned by the village, I believe, right?
Right.
And so you got that covered here. There's probably a predictable replacement rate amongst those.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We do, I don't want to say we get ahead and replace those pumps because we do wait for them to go down, and then it's a quick response to get that up.
Right. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Hey, JP, thanks for that. I want to just double check though, right? Because the original plan, and correct me if I got the years wrong, Chris, when we had the three phases we were going to do it in, was supposed to be done in 21, 22, and 23, correct?
I don't have that.
I think that's right. It's right, or it's within it's right, or it's within a year. Maybe it was 22, 23, and 24.
Yeah.
But I guess I just want to make sure we're being honest with ourselves. We didn't put something that we thought was superfluous in back then, right? So we thought those needed replaced at that point. Maybe not imminently, but we thought that was a reasonable plan, right? And when we did that, and we all know inflation has changed dramatically and everything else, we thought those 3 phases of 5 each was going to cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 or $600,000 per phase. And so we haven't had a catastrophic failure, knock on wood, and that's good. But that would have suggested we were going to have 15 done for $1.5 million by 23 or 24. It's now 26, and we still have 5 more to go. And we know the cost has gone up considerably. And so, JP, when you say I'm not worried about, or, feel good about where we are, I trust you implicitly, but what was the disconnect from, because again, I don't think you were just looking for projects, and it wasn't you.
I wasn't. It was driven
so
it was driven by age. Initially, the system's an older system. We looked at the oldest first and the most critical, and which ones should be responded to, and what the priority order was. So we did that. We did have one catastrophic failure at Steve Bonnet, but we had that first set. So we had all the equipment here. So on that down, that's the one we had to pay an additional mobilization on to get everything done. We replaced the control panels and the pumps. We did not replace or do the work to the wet well or the rails. We came back and just did that recently. But we were lucky enough to have that equipment and those pumps and those control panels, especially because those were the ones that were really delayed on site. So we were able to do that. So we did have that one that was out there that we were fortunate to have the materials here. As far as the others go, we all knew that they were older and they were aging. We did have problems. Some were nursing more than others. But when those first bids came in that first year, after we put the initial plan together, they came in much higher. We had our bidder came in. We bid that the second time, and it came in at $150 a piece. But the next lowest bidder was at $500,000 per lift station. So we wanted to move forward. We wanted to do that in time so that the increases. We knew it increases every year. The price was going up, so we wanted to do them as soon as possible. But we had to balance that between other things we were doing, the wastewater plant, other things that were affecting the enterprise fund. So we had to balance that out. And we're going to do comfortably. I'm not gonna put us in a position where we could have a catastrophic failure and have to shut a section down. That's just not gonna happen.
Yeah, I just, as we've gone through this and we look back at it, I kind of had that question about the vendor too. Because every time we would set a revised timeline, it would slip a little. And so I'm wondering these last 5, do we have the timing for when we think those will be done? Because to your point, they're just going to get more expensive with time. And I want to make sure we budget adequately for them.
And we've been initiating a weekly meeting with that contractor to keep them on track. And I also been doing some other collection of information and pricing in case we have to make any changes.
Okay. So when do these last 5, do we have a firm date for when we think those will be done?
We talked with the contractor and we told him we want it done by the end of this fiscal year.
Hold on, not the 5 remaining, the 2,
This phase.
the ones that are in this current phase, Scott, are the
Yep.
ones that we've told him that he needs to wrap it up by the end of this fiscal year. The 5 additional ones that are the 2 horsepower and the 1 3 horsepower, JP and I talked, and there may be opportunities that we can do some of those in-house.
Okay.
So we're assessing that as a possible option, Scott, relative to cost. But also within the CIP, those are in there. But we need to, Scott, to answer that specifically, we need to look at the CIP and see where those align in terms of years and quarters that we think we can get it done.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just addressing phase 2 and phase 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and you did exactly what I was asking. I asked it poorly, JP. So I guess what I want to be clear on though, Chris, is when we're looking at this budget right now, when we still have 5 lift stations potentially out there, and I guess that would be 2 more phases, they're not included in this budget that we're looking at right now.
No, they're not. Only South Baldhead Wine main lift station is included in this budget.
Okay. And then the other thing, Peter, help me out, because when you were talking about what we were pushing your lobbying efforts, when you were giving that update, you mentioned that not knowing if we would get the full, kind of grant, which, I don't think is probably likely for the wastewater treatment expansion, you were pursuing smaller projects. And I thought pretty specifically, you said the Timber Creek lift station is what we were pursuing a grant for.
Yes, yeah, and what that is, that lift station was part of, it's necessary for the overall expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. And it was in the calculations when we were looking at the budget for the overall wastewater treatment plant. And so what we were looking at is going back over the construction drawings, the contract drawings, and saying, well, can we pull any of this out and have it as, can we break it out and break out portions that are at costs that we could get a grant for? So it's like, we're not going to get a grant for 48, but boy, we could probably get one for 3.5. So therefore, let's pull this out of the overall project and see if we can incrementally start picking away at the bigger project.
Yep. And that tact makes sense to me. I guess the numbers is where I start getting confused though, is that Timber Creek lift station was it before in one of these 3 or 5 or 6 phases of lift stations we were considering upgrading before? Or is it entirely distinct? And if it's entirely distinct, why does it $3.5 million versus the other ones when they're
Yeah, JP's over here nodding his head. Will you guys please shut up so I can give you the answer?
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Put all the pieces together for me, JP.
Yeah, no, I know.
Primary main was part of phase 2, but I like to keep in mind that the one we're talking about, phase 2, the existing lift station, is going to be completely replaced in this proposed. So it's a completely new lift station, though it's going to be right next to it. It's not refurbishing an old one, it's actually installing a new one.
Okay.
So they are kind of different things.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So when we're talking about the lift stations and the phases that we've been through, that's all about upgrading or refurbishing existing equipment. This grant that we're proposing is an entirely new lift station that's not on the system at all right now.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
And as a reminder, we asked our our engineers with McKinnon Creek in this effort to break down the project and cost and with scope. And I just, from a practical standpoint, and I think Mike Nixon, who presented the retreat, had said, look, the Timber Creek primary lift station is really probably the only component of this whole project that we can break out.
Yep.
I say that because I don't want there to be the sort of the expectation that we're going to be able to break out other things within the rest of the scope that are going to get us, in other words, we're going to have to go for the remainder of the project.
Yep.
In terms of funding.
I understand
Well, then,
that's in case something does pop up.
Right.
Then my ask on this is when we reconvene on this, if y'all would please, just so we can close this lift station conversation entirely, if you could like remind us again, and not in the broad headings of lift station phase 4, because phase 4 is, that's not very descriptive, but actually what were the 15 or 18 lift stations we thought we were going to do? How many of those are done? And what the remaining 5, when do we think those need to be done? And how much do we expect those to cost now that we know what we know after doing the first, whatever it is, 12 or so? That would be really helpful.
Right. And to add to that, the alignment within the CIP in terms of time. Right.
Yeah. I'm not trying to jump the timeline, but I want to be able to anticipate it because, again, in hindsight, not through any fault of anybody here, but they're a lot more expensive and the timeline's been a lot longer than what we thought it would be initially. And so I want to make sure we plan for it appropriately going forward.
Okay. So on the sewer side, one of the other things I wanted to point, let me go back. One of the other things I wanted to point out was the septic to sewer 26 change outs. So this reflects there's 26 current septic tank systems that have to be converted and connected to the village's force main. This goes back to the 2007 ordinance when the sewer line was extended up to the end of Middle Island. The council at the time said in 20 years, everybody's going to be on the system. And from the start back then that nobody could put septic tanks in the ground anymore. So these are the 26 that
So they're all in Middle Island.
I don't think they're all on Middle Island. There's
Most of them.
probably a number of them. Because there wasn't in 07, there wasn't a whole lot of homes out there that existed.
My recollection is when this change happened in 07, you could sign up and connect to the sewer at a very reduced rate. But if you waited and did it later, it was a much higher rate. Is that still the case?
Yes. So what they put in place back then was the maintenance plan. So you paid into that on your annual bill, on your monthly bill, so that if there ever came a problem with your septic tank, utilities would go out and inspect it. And if the director deemed it that it was non-functional, they would have to shut it off. That we would connect them to the force main at no cost. And so that was that program.
And
so
will bring 26 more bulbs into the wastewater treatment plant cause any problems, or is there plenty of capacity? Just check.
Okay. Let's see, on the water side. Yeah. Okay. Moving forward, on the BRAT fund.
Chris, one last question on the septic conversions. Are they
Yes.
do they actually have to remove the tanks or are they just burying them?
I think With, JP says decommission, but that in reality, practical speaking, some of them you fill
Disconnected.
Yeah.
them. Yeah, disconnect and fill them with sand.
And do you have to
Okay.
pump?
Yeah, do we have to pump them?
Yeah, they're pumped clean before that.
Okay, so we know that what the BRAT fund is for, to support things such as beach renourishment, public beach access improvements, recreational amenities, tourism related infrastructure, et cetera. This also supports the Shoreline Protection Department and those annual recurring appropriations for shoreline monitoring and our annual beach profile monitoring program and report. Completing improvements to our public beach accesses. That's an ongoing commitment. As we know, it's dynamic out there and the dunes grow and move. So we got to continue to repair, elevate, and extend. And then also we've incorporated that our village cost share for the core feasibility study at 200,000. And some of the costs associated with our conservancy agreement on environmental related areas like beach vitex and creek water quality, bacterial sampling is included in the BRAT fund. The revenues that can generate from our accommodation taxes. So this table reflects the current fiscal year and projected FY27. We're looking at a variance of 995,000. I think that's predominantly with a decrease in the fund balance appropriation of 818,000. Transfer from capital projects at 547,000. I'm trying to recall, Zach, those decreases, what they were attributed to. While Zach's looking at that, thanks, Laura. You had touched on this about, being conservative on our estimates, and instead of 90%, we did include 100% of the estimated collection rates in our revenues and interest earnings.
Can I just ask, the interest implies that there is a balance somewhere else, right?
So yes, it's the BRAT fund has a fund balance like the general fund balance.
Yeah. I can do my math backwards on your interest rate that you showed me. Gotcha. Thank you.
So that's the revenues. This slide and table reflects that projection on our estimated revenues for accommodation tax at 2.139 million, which we've included in those revenues.
So at the club, and this was an open session, so I'm okay with this. We had conversations about the real estate market, looking at whether there'd be a lot of transfers and what was happening. And it's very clear that the real estate community doesn't think the sales will be as robust as they have been. But they do think the rental programs are going to be strong largely because of the economy. People aren't going to fly to Europe when the cost of airfare is outrageous. But they'll take their family on vacation at a beach. And I don't know if that's reflected in this projection, or is it a conservative projection, or what are your?
You want to speak to that, Zach, and how you did that projection?
Can you ask it one more time? I was looking up the last question.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay, but you can do the last question before you do this one.
It's okay. We'll have to get back to the fund balance.
Just that the projections for this year are that the rentals will probably be strong because fuel prices are so high and people won't travel as much.
Gotcha. So, the way we did the calculations here, that FY26, the first 3 quarters are what came in already. And then we took an average of the prior 4 quarters and used that average as our pretend quarter 4. And that's where we got the estimated number from. So I mean, if we want to look at increasing it above that,
I'm not, I'm just trying to understand where we are.
Yeah, I don't know that we're able to make that correlation with this and with what you're describing with what the sales and the clubs are saying. So
Okay.
we just, yeah,
But we're also going to be hiring somebody to be looking for this money.
yeah, we'll see how that.
Let's hope we get more in.
Yeah. All right. On the expenditure side, again, conservancy related areas within the services agreement. We used to have a decrease in the tourism line of 50,000 from the reduction of the one-time funds that we needed for engineering or construction plans for public bathrooms. So that's the deduction there. And then an increase in recreation of 36,000 for funding for gravel loads at the creek access and the beach access parking lot, handicap beach access parking lot at Muscadine and South. But in sum total, between current FY26 and FY27 projected, a reduction of $1 million. That's predominantly with the transfer to the general fund with the bond proceeds carryover that we moved.
Okay, so I was about to ask that. So when you're talking about transfers, the general fund, it's geared specifically for bond expenditures for the beach.
sure.
Okay. Is there any other criteria that we could transfer money out of the Pratt fund into the general fund?
Yeah, there's in the session law, and I don't remember, so help me out, but it's capital is allowed, as long as it relates to public safety, tourism, public work.
Capital with respect to those things. Capital expenditures with respect to that.
Not just capital, I think it's very broad.
Well, where my question was, earlier this year, we were looking at the Panama tract and whether that's something we could afford to buy. We didn't go down that path, but there's the utility lot and there's, I don't know what else is going to become available. And so do we either have some kind of contingency in the general fund for purchasing property that all of a sudden comes on the market? Or is it something that we could look at the Pratt fund and say, look, we can transfer money out of the Pratt fund if we can develop a narrative that fits the Pratt fund?
Yeah, I think it depends on the use of the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be more comfortable with having the on that, right? Before what can the money be used for?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fine. That's fine.
Is
Because I think it's, I want to make sure, I know that we're going to be, the utilities parking is on the block. And I just don't know what else is going to be on the block. Okay.
I think it's one of those things that if it comes up, it's unknown, but if it comes up that this is available and we're interested in it, that we do that financial analysis piece and consider all fund balance, unrestricted fund balances as sources to collectively potentially purchase whatever it might be.
Right.
And if it's use of Pratt funds, that depending on the scenario that we make sure with legal that it fits within the realm of the session.
Yeah, because I think when we were looking at the utility block, we were looking at hitting the utility fund as well.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
Chris, on the same note, we don't take the parks like the maintenance and the landscaping and stuff like that out of this fund. Could we?
So those costs for that is accounted for within the public works,
Right.
But presently, and the question is, could we use Pratt funds to supplement those costs? I think might go back to Zach's question, might be a follow-up with legal to make sure it fits within the the realm of the session law approved.
Okay.
I thought to say I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I mean, that comes down to the question of the, I do know we have some money in the budget right now for adding vegetation in the medians, and that's already scheduled to happen. Is that one of those categories that could softly walk into the Brat Fund because it's. But that's the question. So I got it. Okay, good.
You got it. All right.
We could probably make a good case that, a lot of different expenses could come from the Brat Fund. It's just whether we really want to do that or not.
That's right. That's right.
If you go back to the actual, I don't know about any current changes, but if you go back to the original statute, you can use it for public safety. You could use it for even for utilities if it's related to the fact that you have to provide services that you wouldn't normally provide, except for the fact that you have tourism.
Yeah. And I think it's just questioning our own priorities and whether, things are either covered or they're not covered. And yeah. Okay.
I mean, we could make a case that, every single dollar can go into the general fund because obviously we pay a lot more in beach renourishment, in debt for beach renourishment than the total income for the Brat Fund. So, technically all of this could end up going into the general fund if we wanted it to.
Yep. So, just to acknowledge, some of the expenditures with the beach accesses in this budget's $145,000 for beach access repairs and maintenance.
Okay.
And then transfers to the general fund to fund the shoreline protection department and that portion of the GO bond debt. Moving on to the stormwater.
The only question I'd have on the Brat Fund really quick is because you basically have and this may not make sense to do, but we have the beach renourishment piece, which includes the $200,000 for the Army Corps study. We could, if we wanted to, take that $200,000 out of the Brat Fund balance and increase the amount of money going from the Brat Fund to the general fund by $200,000, because that's basically a one-time study that's going to be happening, and then we won't see that again next year, I don't think, right?
Well, just a reminder on the feasibility study that it's a 3-year, up to $3 million cost. So
Okay.
our 50%. So there may be future.
Okay. All right. So it's good to keep it budgeted, so we'll have it for next year. Okay.
Yeah. But this 200,000 is for the initial scoping and initial coordination work that would be required to get that project kick-started and moving forward.
Okay.
And that's assuming that, which has not yet been determined, if Congressman Rouser's office came through in our congressional funding request to for that 200,000. Okay. So that's all to say, if we get that funding request, then we won't have to spend that.
That's right.
200,000.
Well, and it was also built into the budget for last year as well, and we didn't spend it. Yeah.
Correct.
So that the increase of 48 is really just goes from 240 or from 148 up to 197 in that beach renourishment fund, I guess, is really how it works out.
The stormwater fund. This is just the fund that provides revenue sources to support activities with respect to stormwater management, including maintenance of culverts and ditches and swells and the outfalls, ensuring our drainage across the outlet is good. It supports purchasing of pumps and ancillary equipment, so we're ready and prepared for when we need to respond to flooding events. The stormwater fund is funded through the collection of the stormwater fee, which is $8 per month per property, and that's improved property. It has to have a structure on it. So, let's see here. I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm catching you and Jesse out the side glance of my parade. You guys have any questions?
Not of you. Karen, this is public, correct, this meeting?
Yes.
And is it being recorded, so will people be able to retrospectively see it? Okay, thanks, okay.
Workshops I've been
Yeah, sorry, Chris. Great, thank you.
every year for the last few years.
Sorry, Chris, I tried to do that without you knowing, so you wouldn't be distracted.
Jesse and I are passing notes.
Do you want to retract some comments now, Jesse?
No, maybe that strip club thing.
Okay,
fair
we're
enough.
just about done with the formal part here, so, just to continue, this just shows the revenues were projected, through FY 27 with stormwater fees and interest earnings and our fund balance appropriation. About 388,000. And fund balance appropriation of 236,000, I think is captured on the next side with expenditures. In addition to the stormwater equipment, the construction, which we may look to include funding for Timber Creek outfall erosion mitigation. It's been occurring along North Ball Headline that we've been looking at, but also potential funding for 2 stormwater construction implementation projects that we looked at during the retreat with the gravity fed systems in the Cape Fear area and the Black Skimmer Morning Warbler areas specifically.
I got some feedback on that particular thing. I think the club got concerned about those 2 projects, and so I just think, just as a note, we need to make sure we communicate well with them as that's going forward.
Yeah, Slaughter, to that point, we had follow-up meetings with our engineers, with Withers, and they put together additional information, and I'm just waiting to, I reached out to David to coordinate a follow-up meeting with him and Adam and JP and I to look at that, to try to allay those concerns of adding flows into those lagoon systems. So hopefully we'll lay those concerns.
Yeah, we had some discussion about that, and the club is not as worried as it was before.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't
Okay,
mean,
good.
but I had spoken with JP last week. Everybody's happy that JP will be in the mix.
And I think we as a council and as a community, to the extent others are listening, ought to lobby or that we are a community here and we all work together. The club, very different from a lot of other places, is a part of the village as much as it's an independent club. So I think there'll be I'm hopeful that there's some pretty good understanding.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to
Jesse, just really quick, I think there was a concern that there was going to get water pumped into the lagoons without consideration for what that was going to do to the water quality in the lagoons and the ability of the club to get that water out. And so it really was, just a feeling to some extent that the idea was, we're just going to use the club lagoons as the outflow for every stormwater project that we have. And in the long run, that's going to be difficult to sustain. So that was the concern.
I heard it a little differently. I think with the clarification, I think this won't be an issue.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and from where I sit in the village, having to respond with extreme flooding events, in the history between the village and the club, and how we have to work together to respond and recover from those extreme events, that we do a good job, and we know what we're doing and how we do it, and we do it well. This is just adding to that process.
Yeah, that's fine. I think there was a little bit of overreaction, I think, to some of
that's what I heard.
What they heard in that presentation after they listened to it. And then some of it was just that it was kind of a surprise that they hadn't heard much about it until then.
Just to summarize, total general fund budget of 18.84 million, a slight decrease. We've seen all the capital investments, what that means for the tax rate, the staffing compensation we went over, the BRAC fund, utilities fund, stormwater fund. So total overall budget with all funds is 26.7 million. So looking ahead, thanks. Important next steps. Manager submits the recommended budget to council on Monday, May 4th. That includes a budget message along with a copy of this presentation. It's available to the public.
Well, we tweak it with the change.
Yeah, we given the feedback we've gotten this morning, there may be some tweaks to it. But we have, in terms of process and what we are required to do by state process guidelines, is put that manager's budget message out to the public in advance of the public hearing that we'll set for the next council meeting on May 15th. Council will not take a vote to approve that budget. It'll be more or less an opportunity for council to hear the comments from the public in their review of the draft budget that, depending on the level, may warrant another budget workshop, which we included in the budget calendar for Thursday, June 11th, if needed. And then the budget adoption by vote of council would occur at the June 18th regular meeting.
Yeah, one thing to clarify, when you're saying the manager submits recommended budget, submits, is that in the form of, hey, we're gonna get a folder and you take it home and play with it?
Because the statute.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we weren't talking about a meeting on May 4th. This is just
Presents versus.
present, person in person. Okay, got it.
So I just have a couple of things. So very material item was this UDO or whatever, UDO. So whether that's interactive in a matter, that's actually a pretty big number, right?
It's
Now this one was April of 2024. So I told Jay we probably need to get back with Withers to reassess that cost. So in addition to providing the scope, because the scope's going to be the same, given that to y'all to look at, Jay's going to get back with Withers to see if they would, if they would honor this. Thank you, Mayor. Honor this, or if there'd be a slight increase to it in between now and the May meeting.
Okay, so before you present the budget to the town, as for the village, we'll know if this is in or out, whether council wants it in or out.
Yeah, the timing of that is pretty tight.
Right. So that's I guess I'm just more saying that could be a material item, to the budget. So I guess I'm just bringing that up. I'll leave it to you to sort how that works.
I mean, probably an easier way to handle this, if you all agree that we need to move forward with it, is we look at using what we have in there right now for contingency and apply some of that to this.
So I don't want to speak for everybody else here. I'd like to see that proposal that was given before I would say
this. Okay, yeah.
I'd like to see what
in your inbox later this week.
I'll be back to you. Give me a couple of days.
Yeah.
But there's that. Then Zach, I just have a request. If this document's going to be made public, can we just start with a summary page that shows the 26 million, at high level? You summarize at the end and one can go back and, add each of the categories, but just put 26 million in each of the things with it, just as a starting point to orient people.
Summarize each fund up front.
Well, just the high level. So you say, just show the elements of the $26 million, across each of the tabs as you have it here, right? I mean, because you start with the general fund, I think is 18, then you go through each of them here. Let's just
Do an executive.
yeah, just do a summary at the start. You don't need to put a lot of detail, just so everybody knows, so that somebody doesn't say, wait, I thought it was 18, now it's, and then it kind of do some math as they go through.
That budget summary highlight higher up in the document so they get.
Just as a starting point, so it's because I think that people's attention wanes as they read through documents, perhaps, let's just avoid a lot of questions. I think it's also useful to do. And then the last thing, Chris, you were gonna, I think what I heard you say today was you're comfortable with the paving as projected here, but that would potentially be one other material thing. So assuming you're comfortable, then that is where it is, so. Dog happy.
So
I'm sorry.
that's okay. All going is that last slide, which was discussion and questions. And before that, I just want to thank my staff for all the work that they've put into this, throughout the process, getting us to this point. Was obviously Zach having a heavy hand on this, and appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for being so patient with me, my first review here.
Yeah.
Nice work, guys.
Yeah, I think these guys have their directions as to where to go. The only thing that I would be looking at is kind of going back to your question about the UDO. There's things that, I look at the island and this gets us through 27, and I appreciate 27. I also would like to be thinking of this in terms of 30. Where are we really going? And I think that, Slaughter's talking about, spilling his water going around, and Betsy's talking about spilling her chili.
I didn't want to use the exact example that she used, okay?
Yeah. So you're dragging chili around.
I just don't believe that.
You know there's not water in your cup either.
Yeah, I think that if we're looking at this with seriousness, and I'd like all of us to consider, the next couple of days, just is that the right budget? $300,000 for paving this year, and it's anecdotal your assessment of what's going on, but I think we've fallen behind on paving. And so the question of we need to do paving and this is how much we can afford to do. I was like, well, you know what? We're not doing what we can afford to do. We have to make a bigger jump.
Yeah.
And my question is whether I want to make sure that we're making some decisions also based on, 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road. And I think the UDO is one of those 5 years down the road things. And I know we can struggle along without doing that if we want to, because we've been doing it for a long, long time, but it's appropriate to do it.
Well, I'm not,
And appropriate to do it now.
Yeah.
But you look at what the scope is and just.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand it. I mean, I do think we need to understand those restrictions and what we're allowed to do, put it all in place, and then we may want to make decisions about some things that we want to change going forward. There's, noted that there's a proposed moratorium on I guess it would be permits is what was written up.
Permitted uses, specifically residential in the PD2C zoning district. If I wanted to continue.
Yeah, it's really targeted.
That one's targeted, but broadly, our ordinances have been a consolidation piecemealed over the last 25 years.
Which is what the UDO will present to us, and then from that we can say, okay, we want to make these changes.
Yeah, the UDO process would take all of that and go through it and rework it. We would, if there's there's questions about preservation or there's questions about a variety of different land uses or permitted uses that have come up over the past, and there's things that you want to see on the island. It takes a holistic view approach and view of that.
I think it also addresses contradictions. So you have 15, 20 years of here's another Band-Aid, here's another Band-Aid, and some of those contradict each other. It's just a matter of getting a storyline, a new baseline, basically.
Yes. So let me, so I think I understand that. So I just want to talk to what I was envisioning from that. Because we have certain things we can do as village government, certain things we can't do. But we want to look at our zoning and assess, is it to the extent we can make changes? Are there changes that we want to make? And I think we need to do this UDO first to do that. To get to.
Well, no, the UDO process would include that.
Well,
And it would codify that.
it will codify where we are, but then I think what we wanted before that would be finalized then. We want to say, okay, is this truly what we want?
Right.
The first step is going to be, here's what you have right now. Here's recommended changes, and then we can decide, okay, thank you.
There'll be a series of public engagement meetings. They will review the comprehensive plans and, try to get input from the community on some of this stuff.
Great.
As we work through the process.
Okay, then I have one other thing with respect to the budget. So there was earlier discussion of two things. One was building a pavilion over at the Marina Park, and the other was supplementing a concert series. I didn't specifically see any of that contemplated here. Does that mean that there's no money in this budget for it as the budget is written?
That's correct.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
And that's also true for land acquisition, correct?
I mean, as the budget's written, there was a contingency, but we talked about reversing that contingency. So with that gone, there's no room for these other things then.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I mean, but at any point, if we want to buy land, we have money in the general fund that we can allocate to buy land. It's not like there's no money. There's money. It's just not in the budget for this year. So Jesse, you're not.
Yeah, it's just a budget amendment.
We're not hamstrung by the budget.
Thank you. That's a good clarification. Thanks, Laura.
We don't have things identified, but there's money there if we identify them.
Got it.
Okay. And I think the whole question of concert series, toilets, pavilions, that goes back to my comments. So where do we want to be going? And we don't have it in this budget. Those things, we have different things right now. But, do we somehow, some way, someday sit and have a conversation like, we don't have public toilets, but this is how fast our population is growing. This is how many tourists we have coming. And therefore we anticipate we really have to have public toilets in 10 years. Well, then let's plan for it. And it should be reflected in future budgets as we go forward.
Right.
Yeah, Peter, I think that's a good point. I mean, I do think we need to have a multi-year plan, and I realize it can't be very accurate because things come up and we don't know about them. But I think we really do need to have a multi-year plan. I don't want to say 10 years. 10 years is too far. 5 years maybe right. 3 would be okay. But just something that would show us, this is the growth of our personnel costs. This is the growth of these other administrative costs. Here's the potential growth of the revenue side. And if you look at the last few years, personnel costs have gone up, 8% last year and 11% this year. If we look at these two budgets, we can't do that. I mean, that's just not going to work. The tax base doesn't grow more than 1 or 2% on the island, and it's not gonna grow more than 1 or 2% unless we start taking advantage of taxing the increase in property values. So we're basically operating at a expense growth path that it far exceeds inflation right now, and we have a revenue growth path that falls far short of inflation, and those two things just are not going to work going forward. So I really do think we need to have that longer term picture of it so we can understand when we vote to do a 7% potential pay increase for our employees, we don't have the ability to fund that for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. It's just, we don't have the money to do it unless we raise taxes substantially. So I really do think we need to keep an eye on that kind of stuff and figure out how we're going to keep our expenses in line with our potential revenues.
Well said.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just to beat the brat issue for a minute, I think that, you know, we had all these programs, you know, we have the money in the brat system. Can we just spend it? I think that there's discussion that we need to have eventually about, you know, does it make sense to be looking at that brat fund and breaking it down a little bit more and saying, so here's the brat fund and overall use of the brat fund as a guideline. Say, okay, we're going to spend 3% of the brat fund on this, you know, budget 3% of the brat fund on tourism or something like that, and 3% on, you know, whatever. I'm just saying it shouldn't just be the brat fund and what do we have left to do? And we can throw the brat fund at it to actually start defining exactly what the brat fund, how the brat fund could be broken down for different uses and have that as a guideline.
Well, I'd like to save as much of the brat fund as we can for renourishment. Because renourishment is going up every year. So to the extent we target a lot of that money for renourishment, that's
right.
Huge.
Yeah, but I think it could be a budget question. We get down to that year, we're looking at the brat fund as days. You know, we always allocate 10% to this type of activity. We can't do that this year. Is not a priority anymore. We got to shift our priorities and throw it all at the beach. You know, but rather than having a conversation or just.
Well, I think
that should be part of the conversation. Is all I'm saying.
I think when we get to the point that the brat fund covers the full cost of our borrowing for beach renourishment, we could have that conversation. But until then, my feeling is the brat fund should be for the beach. And we shouldn't be using the brat fund for tourism and other things because that's not as important as making sure that, I mean, the single biggest thing we can do to promote tourism on Bald Head is make sure the beach is nice. So, you know, to think of that fund as, well, we're going to use as much as we can on the beach, but we're going to also allocate 10% to this and 20% to this. That's, to me, that doesn't make sense. The other issue I see is that if we are successful ever at getting to a point where we're paying the Army Corps to put sand on beaches in a different mechanism, then we're going to need to potentially have money in the brat fund to make some of those payments, because we're not going to be able to go through and do a bond referendum every time we want to pay the Army Corps, you know, $800,000 to do something. So that money needs to stay there so we're ready when we have that opportunity.
Yeah, a couple points to follow that. Slaughter is, you know, historically to recognize from a practical standpoint that the brat fund is, in my opinion, is never going to be at a level that's going to support funding a complete beach renourishment project. It's just the accommodation tax revenue generated just can't support that in the time frames that we have to be ready within 6 years to do a project. So therefore, that's why we have to
I might have said that just to sort of bring attention to the fact that beaches cost a lot more than what we're bringing in from accommodations tax.
Right.
But yes, I understand.
But what it does fund is the engineering and design and permitting work for the project,
right,
which we've accounted for at about $1 to $1.5 million. So that's the benchmark we want to maintain in the brat fund to at least be able to cover those initial expenses before we have to.
And that makes sense, probably more, because those costs are only going to go up. So it's not like it's going to be, you know, a fixed rate to do that.
Right.
I just think, you know, there was a time back 10 years ago that promoting Bald Head as a tourist destination was important for the island and important for the village, because we needed to try to increase income and make sure that our taxes from rentals didn't go down and that our property value stayed high. But at this point, I don't see much benefit in promotion of the island as a tourist destination. I think most of in fact, our mission and vision statement that we put together really doesn't mention any of that. And it seems to me that allocating those funds for anything other than beaches, beach accesses certainly makes sense. Even parking around beaches to make sense. But there's a lot of money we need for those things. And to me, if we take all the other things that the Brat Fund could be used for, those should be things that we do in a budget session like this. And we say, is this something that's really important for the village right now? Does it take precedence over other things we do? And if it doesn't, then it shouldn't be funded. And we shouldn't just look at the Brat Fund and say, hey, there's money over there. We could do some of these things that we really don't think are quite as high a priority as our general fund things, but we have money in the Brat Fund, so we should do them anyway. And I just think the beaches are critical.
And to your point, Slaughter, the beaches are existential, right? And nothing's ever going to be a higher priority than that.
Yeah. The other point I was going to make is that if we can get some success out of the reevaluation of the sand management plan, that
It's all a different story then.
I mean, we could basically be self-sufficient annually with what debt or with what would be required to fund the delta costs for the extra pipe and mobilization to put sand on the island every 2 years within probably the current fiscal year budget. Because right now we're annual debt.
But in order to make that, if we were to get that change made in 3 years, we'd need the money in the Brat Fund in order to pay for that, because we'd still be paying off the debt from the last renourishment for 3 more years after that. So if we don't save the money there, we could find ourselves in a situation where, gee, we'd really like to spend $1 million diverting sand, but we don't have it, and because we spent the money from the Brat Fund. So I just think it's important to keep it there if we can.
Yeah, I get it. And I have a different opinion about some of that. So just say, I appreciate your opinion and I totally understand it. There is an aspect of, I live in a community and there's certain things that, that implies there's a community that's great. That's a great, the beach is the most important resource. But at the same time, there's a sense of community that I think needs to be fed as well. And I'll bring that up as a conversation point whenever we're talking about the Brat Fund.
But why don't we?
I'm not arguing with you, Slaughter. I'm just saying that I have a different point of view that I think also needs to be addressed when we talk about these things.
Sure, but why don't we talk about that as part of our general fund conversation and say if we want to have a certain budget for community building, that's great, but that should be part of our general fund conversation. And it seems like by putting it over on the Brat Fund, what it does is it sort of takes it out of the conversation around taxes. And I'd rather have us say, gee, if we want to do community building, great. I don't think that's a bad conversation to have. I just don't think it should be had because we have money in the Brat Fund. I think it should be had because we're willing to spend money on it and prioritize it over the other things that the village is doing, like roads and sidewalks and whatever else. We don't have that many sidewalk dollars in our budget right now, but to me, that's where that belongs, not as a one-off from the Brat Fund.
Don't disagree. Okay, great.
Well, I don't want to rush, but if there's not any more questions, we've got some things out on the counter for a little lunch. If you want to,
thank you for all this work. Yeah,
of course, after we adjourn.
You guys, thanks for all the work, Zach. Yes, you're
really good job.
Thank you.
I'm missing
guys.
curtains and stuff though. Did I? Was I not staring close enough at the screen?
Well, in my defense, we moved the meeting up 2 days, so you took 2 days of preparatory time away. So we didn't have.
Well, yeah, so you and Slaughter haven't seen one of these before. In the past, it's been like, and here's the utilities budget. A screen alone. There's some drama that happens that isn't here today. Yeah, but that's good. Right.
Move to close.
Yeah. Got a motion to adjourn?
I still move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Hey, thanks for calling in, guys.
Yep.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Take care, y'all.